Hearing of the Harwich Conservation Commission for May 1st, 2019. The first hearing we have is a request for determination of applicability for 3 Bluebird Lane, proposal for a septic system and landscaping.
Good evening, Dan Croto from Moran Engineering.
Ed Acton, I'm the homeowner.
So this is, Ed purchased this house and it was pretty run down. He's doing a lot of work on it. He wants to do some removal of some invasive plants and trimming of one tree. He'll go into that. Part I was mainly involved with was there's an old cesspool that's basically in groundwater out of the back. Replace the septic as far away from the wetland as possible, which shows in that north west lot corner. We have it crammed up as far as we could. We do need to go to Board of Health for this because of the, for the purpose of getting it away from the wetland setbacks as much as possible. We're going to ask the Board of Health for setback variances to that north lot line and the street line. It's still able to maintain the separation from any of the water, drinking water infrastructure or the neighboring house or their septic system. With that, I'll let Ed go over landscaping, what he was proposing.
Sure. This house was built in 1960, and I don't think it's had really been touched for quite a while, given the orange shag carpet in the kitchen and the green shag carpet throughout the house. But it was very overgrown. The only thing I've done to the outside of the property so far is I just had my brother owns a landscaping company, Tim Acton Landscaping, and I just had him rake all the leaves just so we could see what was out there. So he took a ton of leaves and downed limbs that were all over the property, and I've replaced the roof to date. But I would like to, with your permission, to trim some trees that I've identified on the property with survey tape. I identified the trees that I'd like to trim with the yellow tape out there. Hopefully you saw that. There's 2 holly trees that are overgrown on the front walkway that I'd like to replant, and I marked those with green. And then the trees and or bushes I'd like to remove, I marked with pink tape, and I had written instructions on all the survey tape. So hopefully that was clear enough for you. I can go into detail exactly what I'd like to do, or I don't know if my narrative was clear enough for you. There are on the site plan the trees that I would like to remove, the arborvitaes that are overgrowing the patio and breaking up the patio are marked on the plan. There's a honeysuckle and a bush that I'd like to remove and a gray willow, and those are actually marked on the site plan that you have.
Thank you.
Sure.
Amy, any comments on this one?
So when Mr. Acton had me out to the property and started explaining, it was really just a lot of little things that he wants to do, but the vegetation work combined with the fact that you were going to have to redo the septic anyway kind of lended itself to just making this one RDA filing instead of me doing the vegetation work under administrative review. It just made sense since he's coming here already to put it in with that. And it is a lot of little things. So for the most part, it's removal. It's just very overgrown, as he said, and just not cared for several years. So a lot of it is pruning and then trimming of dead limbs. There is some removal of things such as the honeysuckle bush and the arborvitaes, but I think it's great that you want to keep and transplant the hollies. There's an invasive gray willow at the edge that you want to remove that's been historically mismanaged anyways, I would just recommend maybe we plant like a maple or a river birch or something down there to replace it.
Sure.
But other than that, it's really kind of a general cleanup of the property. There's an awful lot of vegetation there, so you see a few things coming out, but it kind of pales in comparison to what's around there. So it's fairly minor. And of course, the upgrade of the septic is a big benefit. So I would recommend approval with a -3. And I would have a pre-construction on site to go with the landscape contractor to go over everything. Okay.
All right, thanks, Amy. Let's start with Paula. Any
Yeah,
comments or
no,
questions?
I have no comments. We were there this afternoon, so we looked at everything that needed to be removed or trimmed down. I have no questions.
One question,
Sure.
where are you planning to put the hollies?
I was going to transplant them to the northern border here as a buffer between the neighbor's house and myself.
Okay.
Also, I had spoken to the septic installer, and the cesspool is over on the, I guess that would be the eastern property line.
Mhm.
And I'm gonna have him go between the property line and the garage to keep out as far as away from Buck's Pond. And he felt he could get through there in order to fill the cesspool, so we don't have to do anything out front.
Yeah, I was there, it all looks reasonable to me, I don't have any questions.
Yes, Dave?
No, fine.
Yeah, I've got a few things. Because you are proposing removing several trees and shrubs in the 50-foot zone, as well as the hollies close to the 50-foot. What would you think about replacing them with some native shrubs,
Yeah,
possibly closer to the water's edge? Or
I had listed some new plantings at the end of my narrative. 12 sweet pepper bush, and I was going to plant those sort of where the arborvitaes were. And then there was a yew that's over on the edge of the property. I was going to do a couple of arrowwood and some four inkberry hollies over where those dead trees were.
yeah, that sounds good. And I think the red maple or the birch would be a good replacement for the gray willow.
Okay.
And maybe a condition that one is at least a, what would you call that, a 6-foot plus tall specimen, or a certain, what would be a gallon?
2-inch caliper, probably. 1
Yeah.
to 2-inch caliper would be a 6-footer, roughly.
Something
Well, maybe
like
about
that.
a 1-inch
A little
caliper.
bit bigger would be better.
Yeah.
Yeah, something with
But yeah, not
a
a-
good root ball or whatever.
Sure.
And then the only other thing would be to condition our, to update our lawn regulations on the order of conditions, which specify no fertilizer or chemical use of any kind,
Okay.
which would essentially cover the whole lot as you're all within the 100-foot zone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it, can you use like organic or anything like that?
No.
No.
No, there's native grass seeds that do really well that Amy
Okay.
can fill you in. And,
Sure.
Yeah, just to cover bare spots, and
Okay.
we would allow you kind of temporary above-ground irrigation to establish the shrubs and native things, and then it would have to go.
Okay.
So.
Sure.
that's all I've got.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Would any of the commissioners like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make the motion to approve the RDA for 3 Bluebird Lane for septic system and landscaping with a -3 determination. Second.
Second by Mark. All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Send this
Thank you.
around for you guys to sign.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, the next person said if they were not here yet, that they'd like to just get continued towards the end of the meeting.
Okay. All right, in that case, next on the agenda is for 61 Bells Neck Road, a proposal for new dwelling and appurtenances.
Thank you.
Dan Croto from Moran Engineering, here with Jamie Klein, the prospective buyer of this property. Current owners had a engineering company do test holes, and had a wetland delineation specialist do the wetland delineation and in order to market the property. The property has been assessed at over $200,000 that the people have been paying. Jamie Klein is the one posing to buy it. First thing, when he came in, that I said needed to be done was reconfirm the wetland line. So we had Paul Shea, who had done the original one, go out, reflag. Our survey crew went out and came up with the same information as previous engineering company. It's the whole property is in the floodplain, and then there's a wetland across Bell's Neck Road to the northwest, and there's wetland to the east. So it's heavily impacted by wetlands. Or it's in a floodplain, so it's in a wetland resource, I guess. So then we did the offsets of 50-foot no disturb, 60-foot building, and 100-foot for the septic system, and came up with the usable area, again, matching what the previous engineering company or the people were marketing the property. And then, so page 1 of what was submitted shows the existing conditions, the wetland setback lines, and keeping the distances away, and what was available for, as a residential property. Page 2 is an overview of the proposed areas for the new house and the septic system available location. And page 3 is a close-up of the house area. So with that, I will ask for questions and comments.
Thank you. Amy, any comments?
So I had a chance to meet with Dan and Jamie. I think probably a couple months ago, I may have spoken with you on the phone about this parcel. I'm not positive, but.
It wasn't me.
Oh, okay. But I met with Dan recently about this, and hopefully he relayed kind of my comments to you, is when something is this close to being, basically it's such a marginal lot, you've got wetlands on both sides plus floodplain, and you're requesting to go basically on both sides up to the 60-foot, which is where the building it can be allowed at is 60 feet and farther from the wetland. But when you're right up to that line, and particularly more so, I think, for the septic system, you're just outside the 100-foot with your leach field. And I did speak with the health director about this as well. And if that line is just a foot or two off, it can mean the difference between a lot that's buildable and not. So in my opinion, I think we should have a third-party review of the wetland delineation. I understand that you had Paul Shea look at it twice, but as much to protect you as to make sure it meets our regulations. When something is this close, we do have the right to require a review of the delineation.
Okay.
So before we get into really kind of whether or not the house as proposed meets standards, I don't feel like I can do that right now until we have another review done. Because, I mean, a foot or two can mean the whole difference for this property, so.
Okay, well, then I think we should wait
But
on that.
if anybody else
Unless
has-
there's any specific questions people have on the plans to this point. But obviously, we're waiting for that additional information. But it is a chance to ask questions, so if you want to start, Paula.
I was out there today with the rest of the commission. It was really hard to visualize. I really would like to see another independent one done so that we can compare them and make sure that they're, like Amy said, it could make a huge difference. Or it could help you.
Mhm.
So,
Yes, that's true too.
Mhm.
I'll abstain.
Okay. John?
I support what Amy is suggesting. I don't have any questions right now.
Same here.
Yeah.
Same as John.
Jim?
Yeah, no comments for now, yeah.
Okay. Just a quick question on the septic system is, how close is the groundwater, that location, to the, can you have a below-ground septic at that location?
The bottom of the septic is at grade, so there's gonna be a 2-foot mound in the middle of it.
Okay, be raised up.
Yep.
Okay.
There's higher ground, but not higher ground at the 100-foot
Mhm.
as we have it from the welling.
Okay. Would you like to continue to a specific date, or just see how things go and come back to us?
I guess we'll, I think we have to continue to a specific date, don't we, or how does that?
Unless you re-notify a butters, so yes, a specific date.
And what's with the wetland specialist, is that something we're handling, or is that something that the commission's handling?
That is up to the commission. It is in the regs, or the state regs, that, you know, we can require a third-party review at your cost. It's up to the commission if they want to use wetlands funds for that or not. Basically, that would be like a hardship type situation.
We had say the applicant did spend $600
Mhm.
on this wetland delineation. He's not, you know, he's doing the background work before he even
Mhm.
knows if it's what the price of the property would be. I guess, does your commission or your department line up a wetland specialist, or what's the next
I
step?
think we can. We have before.
We cannot, if we're gonna pay them, yes, but if they're gonna, we can't pay for that.
Right.
I mean, so we cannot recommend somebody to you.
Right, but
I mean, you know who does them, but we can't recommend somebody to you,
Mhm.
so. that's
What if we choose to do it ourselves, then we pick?
Then we can pick its professional services. The
Yeah.
cost would be low. I mean, the cost for delineation runs roughly between 500 and 1,000-ish for something like this, so. It's, and it would be a third-party review, you know, we don't, no bias for the commission or for you as a homeowner, none of that. So it's up to the commission how you want to handle it.
Yeah, it doesn't come up very often.
No, but this
So-
one's just so close.
Yeah. No, I think it's important to do it. Will our process take a little bit longer? Same, yeah,
It's a matter of contacting somebody and getting them out there.
yeah.
if it could be done through the commission, then of course, my survey guys would locate them and then get it on the plan for you guys. So I know the applicant would certainly cover the extra surveying drawing
Okay.
cost.
So it would just be a person going out in the field and flagging, and they could
Okay.
pick it up.
Well,
Up to you.
I guess what happens there, if there's a disagreement between the third party, then that
Then the
would
commission
govern.
kind of has to pick one that they believe is the true delineation. Hopefully, they won't be far off. I mean, we have,
No, but like you're saying, a foot or two could be the difference here on, not only for the town,
Right.
for us, but for the health
Yep.
department too.
Either way, about a month, do you figure? I mean, we couldn't do this in 2
that's what I'm
weeks.
thinking. No, it
Yeah.
can't be within
Okay.
2 weeks. It wouldn't be.
Ask you, how do you want to go about it? Commission, or would you want to privately?
I think regardless, the commission's fine with me.
Sounds like the applicant would really like the commission to do the wetland delineation if,
If you would put it on the plan.
Yeah, we'll do the survey and
Yeah.
certify, the licensed survey will certify that the flags are correct. And then,
That's up to you all.
I don't object to that.
Okay. So, our next, so if it's a month out, that would be beginning of June, so that would be the June 5th meeting. Because May 15th just isn't probably going to be feasible to get somebody, to clear somebody's schedule to get them out there and then to have it put on a survey. So June 5th how does that sound for people?
Yeah.
We just want to make sure we get it right, so.
May 15th sounds better, but.
I know.
Yeah, it's,
I don't think you're
I
gonna
don't think
find
you get
somebody
anybody
a
to do
field
anything in 2
crew.
weeks now.
No, well, plus, it's not just the 2 weeks, we need information a week prior, so it's really 1 week.
need to get flagged, we need to locate it, get it on the plan.
Yeah,
Um,
so,
We, of course, do need, Jamie being the applicant, we
Mhm.
of course do
permission.
get to you this week, permission from the landowner,
Yep.
this is the way they want to do it.
Yep.
Because we don't have that
Mhm.
ability right now even to do it ourselves a second time.
Okay,
But I can get that to you by Friday.
that's fine. Yeah,
Okay.
because if we can get it, we can try to schedule. So, June 5th?
all right, then I move that we continue the hearing for the notice of intent for 61 Bells Neck Road until June 5th.
I'll second it.
Second by Stan, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Thanks.
It's up to you, Mr. Chairman. The applicant for 3 Davis, or the representative for 3 Davis is here now, or if you want to continue with the agenda.
We can take them, I think.
Okay.
So next on the agenda is a notice of intent for 3 Davis Lane, a proposal for additions and renovations.
And folks, while we have a minute, there is a sign in the back of the room. If you haven't, we really appreciate it. Thank you. Oops, wrong one.
See, I wouldn't be, wanting to buy property at that kind of,
It looks marginal
yeah.
in a lot of ways.
Good evening. I'm Stephanie Sequin with Broder and Wilcox, and I'm representing the Powers, who are the owners of the property at 3 Davis Lane. This is a over 2-acre piece of property, very long and narrow. A lot of it it extends down to the beach on Nantucket Sound. A lot of it is coastal dune, but up near the road where the existing building is, there is a coastal bank, a pretty well-defined bank that we've located the bottom and top of bank and showing the 50 and 100-foot buffers from the top of the bank. The existing house and guest house are located within the 50 to 100-foot buffer. There's also a pretty well-defined landscaped area, lawn, patio, gravel driveway, various stone and brick walkways. The existing septic system is on the landward side of the house, outside of the buffer, and there's also a tennis court that's outside of the buffer. What's being proposed here are several renovations, expansions of the existing building. I tried to sort of list them in the narrative. On the west side of the building, there's a small bump-out addition that's shown on the plan, and there will also be a second-story addition on that side of the building. On the east side of the property, where the existing guest house is, the guest house is currently just 1 story. They're going to put a second story over that entire structure. Then there's a roof that connects the main building and the guest house. They're going to remove that existing roof and replace it with a roof with a deck on it, and then stairs down to grade. Let's see, then the last thing is on the existing covered porch that faces the water, that presently has decking, at-grade decking that was built over existing flagstone patio. they would like to remove that decking and just leave the patio that was originally there. The existing roof covering that space will stay. It's on columns. They'll have to just extend those columns down to sit on the ground instead of sitting on the deck. The existing, currently, there's 4 bedrooms in the main house and 2 bedrooms in the guest house. There will be no change to the number of bedrooms in the main house, but the second floor over the guest house will add 2 bedrooms, so the existing septic system has to be upgraded because it's only approved for 6 bedrooms. So that is shown on the plan, but it's entirely outside of the 100-foot buffer. I included a sheet, a sketch sheet, showing some of the new structure is going within the footprint, either within the footprint of existing structure or within the footprint of existing hardscaping. So I tried to sort of overlay the existing and proposed hardscaping and building. The total increase in coverage within the 50 to 100-foot buffer is 262 square feet. So as mitigation for that, indicated 2 areas within the existing lawn area that total 540 square feet, so a little over 2 to 1. Mitigation, those areas of existing lawn will be replaced with native plantings, with a plan to be submitted and approved prior to implementation, but that's the location of where the mitigation plantings will take place. And I think that's it. I included a narrative with the construction protocol and the various, most of the roof runoff currently has gutters and downspouts to dry wells, so the new structures will also either continue to do that or have crushed stone at the roof drip line. This doesn't require Board of Health approval. It does, in case you're interested, it does require Zoning Board of Appeals relief because the existing structure is non-conforming with respect to the sideline setback. So they will have to go to the Board of Appeals. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy, any comments?
It's a fairly straightforward project, I think. I think it just leaves us a little bit of opportunity to enhance the buffer zone to the top of the coastal bank, and Stephanie and I have spoken about that, and she said she's spoken with her clients about that. So the additions are pretty much in and around the existing house, not any closer to the top of the coastal bank than existing, and again, all in disturbed, pretty much hardscaped area to begin with. So because it is in the 50 to 100-foot buffer zone, the mitigation at 2 to 1 is required. And what they've shown are 2 areas that are kind of like scalloped out areas of lawn now. And those could be replanted. I had recommended, bayberry, beach plum, one of the Virginia or Carolina roses. I also thought afterwards false indigo as well as sweet fern might work well there too as part of the mix. Some larger shrubs would be good though. And we were on site too, we noticed there seems to be a little bit of manicuring of that. There's a landscaped area right near where these mitigation plantings would go. That's been pretty highly manicured, so kind of allowing that area to renaturalize.
That existing mulched area.
Yeah, would be a good thing, as well as we do have the regulations now about fertilization in the 100-foot buffer zone. So while they have irrigation, the fertilization, the commission could condition needs to cease. But with those conditions, I'd recommend approval. I think we can see some benefit here.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Amy. Paula, do you want to start?
Yeah, we were out there this afternoon. It's beautiful out there. The only comment that I have is the grass area. It was quite plush. It was really lovely. My husband would adore it. But we have to go with no fertilizer, with a grass seed mix that Amy would,
It shouldn't be disturbed, so.
It shouldn't be, but you don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not following.
It
If-
looks to me like fertilizer has been used on that back lawn.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah,
We have to stop that now,
okay,
according to our regs.
okay.
Other than that, I have no other comments.
Thanks, Paul. Mark?
I have no questions, I agree with Amy.
John?
Yeah, can you just clarify for me the location of the mitigation plantings, as you mentioned, or Amy mentioned? There's a manicured area, there are beds, mulched beds there. Are they south of where?
So these
Yes.
two
Right down
here. Those
half
two-
circle
Yeah,
areas,
but the existing planted area, mulched area, where is that in relation to those?
it's
half circles?
between them and the top of the bank.
I see.
So you've got from the house, the lawn goes out, and it's edged in a sort of like a scallop fashion. And then there is a mulched planting strip at the edge of the lawn
Right.
before you get to the actual bank.
To either side of the gate.
Yes.
So are you proposing to replant with natives in those bed areas?
No,
Or you're proposing to
we'll
leave those as is?
Leave those as is and basically expand them into the lawn area.
And I'm sorry, I may have missed it, but have you specified what you would be planting in there? In
I
what-
have not. Amy suggested bayberry, Virginia
Bayberry,
rose,
beach
or,
plum, Virginia rose.
and we'd be happy to submit a list of, or agree to that unless something else is submitted in advance.
And what is currently planted in the beds that are there now? I didn't.
Mostly ornamentals.
Yeah. It looked like maybe some
or hydrangeas
rhododendron,
and-
but yeah, it's, I don't know if they were supposed to be natives or,
There was no,
there is some grass.
I didn't
There are some
find-
plantings on the bank.
Yeah, on the bank, but this, yeah, it's at the top. In the file from, the old file for this, I didn't see any, condition for the plantings there before, so.
That's all? Stan?
Well, I'm still confused about that planting strip. I mean, as far as what you're talking about with the house and everything, everything's fine. But going back to what John, that area we're talking about, what will be done with that? Do we have to change it back to something more natural?
That's up to the commission. I mean, as far as what they're required to do, they have the mitigation allotted for it. But to just stop, adding mulch there, maybe take some of the mulch out, plant some native grass seeds, like just allow the area to naturalize a little bit more. And then plant where they're supposed to be planting too, but let those beds naturalize a little bit.
Right. That's all in
Yeah.
favor.
Yeah, just to clarify on that point, I would like to see the condition that all of the area seaward of where the mitigation plantings are proposed would be left to naturalize, be anything that is considered invasive be removed and replanted with natives. And that whole area should be a natural planting, densely planted with grasses and shrubs, and not in any way ornamental, but a mitigation buffer zone to the top of bank.
So that would be in addition to the mitigation plantings that we've proposed within the existing lawn.
Yes.
Which would be in
yeah.
addition to the 2-to-1 that's required.
Yes.
Well, I think the question becomes is how did that
Yeah.
ornamental strip
Currently, we have
come to be there?
mulch and ornamentals right up to the sand on the dunes, it probably, you know, that's probably taken active maintenance to keep that dune, to keep the sand and keep the natural vegetation back, which shouldn't have been happening over time.
Okay.
Do you know the area of that strip that we're talking? Because, I mean, we saw it from a distance. I didn't go walk right up to how wide it is, or...
It varies from, I'd say, like 4 to 6 feet. As I said, it's pretty much between the proposed mitigation area and the top of the bank. I went to the property for the first time 3 months ago, so I don't know, other than the orders and plans that I found on file, you know, how long the lawn has been there, how long I assume the lawn has been there for as long as the house has been there, which was in the 80s sometime.
How about we do this, because it would be a little, it might be a little awkward to have these, there's somewhat ornamental plants, then the native plants, and how about if you were to, this is just an idea, remove the ornamentals, put the natives that we were talking about where the ornamentals were, and then put the ornamentals landward of that native. Now, that will be a native buffer strip on the top of the coastal bank, so just switch things.
I would just like to point out that the restriction that Paula was mentioning, that there is to be no fertilization or herbicides or any kind of chemicals applied in the buffer area, applies to those beds as well. And so the question is whether the ornamentals that are there are going to be happy under those circumstances, and whether it might be in the best interest of the owners anyway to be planting something there that will be happy in a more naturalized state. I mean, we could take the point of view that the care of those ornamentals is up to the owners, with the exception that there is to be no further fertilization or any application of herbicides or pesticides of any sort. And if they can survive under those conditions, I guess that's a different question. I think Jim's point is a little more towards the end of just forgetting about the ornamentals. I guess the question is whether, given that there are ornamentals there, there's always going to be the temptation to feed them and make them look good.
I know I spoke with the homeowner, and she commented about her ongoing battle to keep the invasives at bay. So I'm thinking she would probably be open to, now that we're talking about this, working with someone who knows more about it than I do, to come up with something that would make more sense. At least, you know, I feel like I'm bargaining, around the edges where it comes into contact with the natural area, which is where the bittersweet is, and so I think some combination of, yes, getting rid of some of the ornamentals in that existing mulched area and managing the invasives at the edge would be acceptable.
I think it would be a mitigation proposal that would have a greater benefit protecting the resource area of the bank. So I think it would be an advantage. So do you want to bring this back to the proponent and see how they feel?
Can we come back in 2 weeks? Or what's your,
That's fine.
okay.
I think so.
It would be good to see a planting plan of the
Right.
area.
And like Jim, I would favor dense bushes that provide structure to habitat, and some beach grasses. So a combination, I think the beach plums
Yeah.
and the,
You don't really have, I wouldn't put beach grass up top there, because you don't have too active sand transport. It's not, it's a bank, it's the dunes at the toe, but you're not seeing active sand transport on the top.
It's not trying to go that far.
No.
Bayberry, beach
Bayberry,
plums.
beach plum, Carolina rose, indigo, sweet fern, things like that. And I'm happy to
Okay.
work with you on that.
And so could that be the mitigation? in-
Getting rid
in
of those
leaving the
beds?
lawn the way it is? And just,
I don't necessarily see it that way. It looks like what is there was supposed to be a buffer planting. It's just hasn't been maintained the way it's
Okay.
supposed to.
Yeah.
I mean, there was
I
some,
have to check.
some natives in there. I think there was some, I don't know if beach plum or the other type of rosa rugosa, which we're not supposed to be planting anymore, but
Yeah, there's some
Th-
rugosa.
That's what it looked like, and we see it quite a bit, is a buffer planting that hasn't been let to naturalize and has been maintained as an ornamental.
Yeah,
That's exactly what it looks like.
okay,
we can go out and take a closer look
okay.
at things. I'm fine with that. It's not a
I'm
bad
fine
place
with
to go.
That seems to be the only comment
Okay.
we have before.
Well, I
so-
think, yeah, the additions seem pretty
Okay.
And I
minimal.
think, it's Paula's and Jim's point, though, on the fertilization of the lawn, because of our updated regs, and the fact that this is a new project under that, the maintenance of the lawn will be, have to follow the new rules of no fertilization.
Yeah, so it's no fertilizer of any kind and no chemical use of any kind. We're not saying that the lawn has to be ripped up, or that it can't be irrigated.
Yeah, it has irrigation
The type
existing.
of grass seed may not do well, depending on what it is, without fertilization, so they may find the need to overseed or something
Okay.
with native grass seed. That's what
Yeah, there's new products that are coming out that people who actually are used to seeing and what they consider a nice lawn, they're close, and they're drought tolerant native mixes now. So better than just the Cape Cod mix that we all used to fall back on. So
It's a good time of year to make the point as well, because this is when, if you get a good rainfall, first half of May, Witchmere Harbor just changes colors, and it goes to a really dark brown. That didn't happen 20 years ago. And so fertilization is probably a component of that. We're not certain, but it's really, it'll happen in the next 2 weeks as things warm up and we get precipitation, runoff, and the harbor just turns a very nasty color.
yeah,
So
ponds too.
it's a hard thing to accept if you've been fertilizing for a long time, but I think it's very important for the ecology of the area.
Okay.
So May 15th.
Okay? I move that we continue the hearing until May 15th. Seconded by John. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have a notice of intent for 0 Sequotum Road, proposal for storm damage repairs.
Yep. Several tonight, I didn't realize that.
Good evening, Dan Croto, Moran Engineering. Here for Joe Preston, the property owner of this waterfront property. The second property across the street is the house property that the Prestons own. We are still in need of the DEP number and NHESP letter stating the, for the endangered species, for the, seems as though they buffered the whole pond by 100 feet.
Yep.
And, yeah, so there's some plants in there that they're concerned with. I'm pretty sure in this case that there won't be a concern and that we're working on areas that are, that were a landscaped lawn or that have no plants whatsoever, that were heavily damaged. If The pictures that I submitted tell the story to anybody that hasn't been out there. This was actually a heavily damaged property last, in the 4 nor'easters last year. He did not do any repair, and now he needs to repair it. There's 2 existing wood walls, one horizontal, one vertical, that are failing. The vertical one is, has fallen down in a few spots completely. He wants to, he'd like to replace those 2 with a concrete block wall, segmented block wall, one of the textured walls, which I think is a good substitute. It won't, it'll last and it will not leach. In the same place, and with the addition of going under the stairway, that there currently isn't a wall. The wall goes up towards the inland, but to hold that back. But anybody who's at the site and looking at the pictures, it's evident that there is failure of that bank, and that it's probably silting into the pond there. On top of that, there was some type of stone patio structure, fire pit maybe, that's now scattered all over the yard. He'd like to clean up and get out of there. There's an old water line he'd like to get out of there. On top of that, there is the shed, which due to the high pond levels the last couple of years, is the bottom of it is getting in the water. He'd like to replace the shed and lift it up a foot so that the water does not go into it. Just looking for my list to make sure I don't leave anything out. If I find it, I'll go through the plan. So the plans that were submitted, we have a page 1, which is the existing conditions plan. And then I have detailed plans. Page 2 is the close-up of just this part of the property. And then page 3 would be a cross-sections of the proposal. So the idea is to stabilize what's now falling apart on his waterfront and to clean up the debris. On top of that, there is the unpaved Sequotum Road has a low point right at the top of his bank, which is eroding, also going down. He would like to mitigate that problem and plant up there with matching the grass that's already on the bank of conservation mixed grass. The other thing is the deck itself. He wants to make sure that that's stable by increasing the posts going down, putting new posts and tubes to make sure that is stable, that is on the bank that's eroding. So he wants to while he's doing this work and fixing the wall, he'd like to make sure that that's stable and he wouldn't have to go back and work on that in 3 or 4 years. With that, I'll quiet down and listen, listen for comments.
Okay, Amy, comments, please?
Nope, a lot of things going on here, but it's all essentially repair of what's there. The replacement of the wall, there are existing walls there, permitted under previous owners. Actually, I don't think the really old wooden ones that are vertical, I think those predated a lot of things, but I have them located on plans, but the wall underneath the deck, we have record of permitting. So replacement of a lot of those structures to a stone wall, and then, essentially all of these are repair items. You're not requesting to expand any hardscapes, so while I don't think we can require mitigation plantings, it's not a bad idea on top of the walls, especially where your plan says garden, to maybe add some native plantings to there, just to add a better root system, which will help the runoff that is coming, because it's all going down from Sequotum Road, so you're gonna get some runoff there. So on top of seeding, getting some other types of vegetation on that slope, and the elevation is such that it's not gonna have an impact on view from the house or anything like that. But I would just recommend that, and I'd be happy to work with the applicant on that. Something we noticed on site was storage of docks. There were docks both by the shed and by the other property line. I don't know if the one by the other property line is the neighbors or for the access, if it's over there, but in the future, I think we should condition that the dock has to be stored. If it's not already conditioned that way for the old owner, it needs to be stored on the upland piece of their property at their house across the street. Because it's right at the, essentially where there's a bordering vegetated wetland right now.
I did bring that up to the owner, and
Great.
he did call a contractor, but it sounds like the contractor hasn't gotten out there yet to
Yep.
fix that problem.
I think in the future, I mean, it's almost boating season now, but in the future, just putting that condition will benefit that. I think, did you mention the sand nourishment that you wanted to do?
I didn't bring that up. That's, now that I found my list.
I had to make
That-
bullet points of all the things.
The sand nourishment, not an essential part of the project, but it was something he was asking for because of how the sand that was there got pulled away in the storms. And the wall itself is being undermined. They will be doing a new wall. So he was looking for sand nourishment in the areas that don't have any vegetation between the pond level and the vegetation.
I think that is okay, as long as it's just kind of a top dressing of sand to cover any roots and establish a more stable base there. And then we can kind of monitor it over time. I mean, we don't typically get, it's not like a beach where you have to do annual sand nourishment, but, keep an eye on it and see how things go. And then something else we noted when we were on the site as well is their fertilized lawn as well, like on the other side of the street, which is within the 100-foot buffer zone. Transitioning that to no fertilization, especially being on Long Pond, which we did treat with alum because of blooms that we've had in there in the past due to nutrient loading. So with that, I think a lot of this is maintenance work, and it'll just take a lot of care to put in a new wall there. If it did exist, it shows up on other plans, so replacement is a possibility.
Thanks, Amy. Paula, any comments?
No.
This application, I'm not a particular fan of the wall being replaced. I think root structure would be much more beneficial on the whole. And the wall that's proposed is going to require quite a lot of excavation. You're going to have to go back at least 4 feet behind it. And given the slope and given the location, it's going to be problematic to have equipment in there. It's going to be quite messy. And I would be in support of a different method.
I'm with Mark. I have the same thought, at least where the pile wall is. I don't know why you wouldn't be putting in vegetation that would hold the bank in place rather than that, given the things we've seen elsewhere where you have a wall and there's gonna be erosion in front of the wall. That seems problematic to me. I don't know why. I mean, unless we have to honor the grandfathering of that wall, I would be strongly in favor of planting vegetation there. I also have questions about what the plan is with the water line that's hanging there, whether that's gonna be kept around. And although it may not be, I don't know whether it's in our purview or not, but the electrical, conduit running under the beach sand and sticking up there with at least 120, hopefully not 240 in there. there's nothing mentioned in the plan about that, but I don't know why you need power down there on the water. Sounds kind of dangerous to me. So that's a comment. I don't know that we can condition things one way or another, but I would be in favor of them keeping the power up on the deck and no further down than that. No further.
Dan?
I have a little different question. Behind the shed, as they replace it, it's almost like a natural wall. They had dropped, there's a trunk of a pine tree that they had dropped at one point. It's almost acting like a revetment back there. What are they gonna do with that? Leave that where it is? Are they doing anything else there?
No, my suggestion was doing a good job, is leave it like
You're
it
leaving
is.
that
It's not
tree
as,
trunk there?
leave it there, it's working, it's holding the bottom of the bank.
Of course,
It's
when
an
they
area
dropped
that's
that
not
there, they
used.
must have naturally put it there. I mean, when they dropped that tree trunk.
Yeah,
I
don't
think
know,
the stump is right there, and I think it was you know, when they dropped it, and they made a natural revetment with that. So they're gonna leave that there.
That would be, I think that's holding that bank. The rest of the bank has fallen apart.
And so they won't disturb that when they're building the new shed or anything.
No, my recommendation was not to remove that pine. The owner himself didn't care one way or the other, but it is working, what it's doing. It is natural, I'm not sure how it was laid in that position.
Kind of,
I think it was prior to this owner even,
right? Okay,
when that was put down there.
so,
Well, that's an interesting point, Stan. In the natural state, oftentimes when trees fall on a pond bank, they actually provide erosion protection. And they maybe shouldn't necessarily always be removed. They're both habitat and
Right.
erosion protection. I have a question as to what the state of the shoreline was to the right of the stairway if you're looking at it from the pond. It seemed like there were 2 or 3 stumps there, and they're starting to grow back right now. I think at least a couple of them are red maples, and of course they grow back from nothing. Some of that root structure is still in the ground. It doesn't necessarily appear that was beech. It appears that there were trees, and it's hard to tell without knowing what was there before, other than the stumps being there. But you wouldn't think that those stumps would have been there on the beach, or the trees would have grown on the beach. There's other soil and organic matter there that doesn't. It's hard to say without seeing a photo of what it was before, but it seems like that may have been a more naturally vegetated area on that side of the dock, which would certainly be better for the pond.
We do have a plan from when the dock was permitted, 2015, under a different owner, showing a fire pit down in that area, which I think is the stone that you see all over the beach at this point. I don't know about the trees at all. This plan is not showing trees, but that doesn't mean there wasn't anything there. It didn't stick out to me that it had been something that was, had large trees recently. I did see the old stump next to that's on the beach now, completely undermined.
Yeah, I think there's 3 or 4 stumps there, and at least 2 of them are growing back at the moment, so they really shouldn't be ripped out of there.
I think as for vegetation versus wall, I'm pretty sure that, it's totally two different ways of maintaining his property, and I would think that you'd really, to handle a slope like that with vegetation, you need a landowner that wants that chore, especially no fertilize or any of that. I don't think that's the way this landowner wants to go. I'm sure sounds like we do need to come up with a planting plan in certain areas. But I think that as for holding back that bank, and it's you know, it's a sizable bank, and one of it's holding back the structure of the deck.
Mhm.
I think this homeowner would like to maintain it with the wall instead of trying to get the right plants to hold that back. So I think that's the way he would want to go. He certainly,
Mhm.
I will suggest we come up with planting, and go from there. As for the trees that are there, I have to get a better opinion from a plant specialist on what would come back. Everything to me looked pretty undermined and washed away, the soil around it. But
How about somewhat, because the wall, while the wall underneath the deck shows very clearly up on previously permitted plans, the wall that's kind of the random posts, not random, but the posts that are put together, that shows up on plans, but that clearly has been there a long time. So under the deck, because of the shade and it's a north-facing exposure under the deck, that's gonna be a little bit harder to get vegetation to grow. But where those posts are to the side of the deck, if that was to be planted or maybe incorporated with a fiber roll above the water line, something like that to add some stability, and then add plantings above that, maybe that would be a solution for that piece of the wall, is to look at something a little softer for this piece.
could be, I'd run it by him. That was an area, last year that was getting hit
Right.
by waves, so fiber rolls, like, something like that would be needed, I would think. Like I said, the wall that's there has certainly been there a long time.
Yeah,
It's nothing, not a work of art or anything, but
no.
it is there, it is failing, and there is still, in heavy rain, there's
Mhm.
nothing holding the bank back right now. So it is a problem that needs to be fixed. I will run the suggestions by to the owner. I don't think this is someone that wants to have an intricate landscaping plan. I know he will do some stuff for mitigation, but I think he wanted a stable area that he could, it's not a property he lives in year-round.
Mhm.
I think he's looking for fairly low-maintenance, stable,
Mhm.
but I'm sure he's open to environmentally sound ideas. But I think on a bank like that, you do need an involved homeowner to, else it is a problem. It will wash into the pond. Whereas for many years, what was there didn't, and then as it got older and last year's storms, there was a different. As with around a lot of ponds in this pond, there was quite a bit of erosion last year.
Well, thanks. I would just encourage you to, ask him to think about, what's sustainable and what will work in the long term. I think Amy's idea is really good. To me, it's an opportunity to look at the site and think about how to do things maybe a little bit differently. There's a lot of structure right there which will be exposed to future storms. So these impacts are gonna keep happening, so I would like to see it, the opportunity to pull back a little bit and restore some of that bank. If you look further down to the east, that bank is really vegetated and it's doing its job. So I like Amy's idea a lot in this situation, so I would encourage you to run that by him. The sand nourishment, other than protecting those roots, I don't know why we'd want to see that there. I think it's going to migrate and cover some of that cobble, which is functional shoreline habitat. So I would want to see really limited cubic yardage.
Mhm. Well, yeah, I was thinking very minimal, if any.
Yeah, I don't know why we'd want that otherwise, and, the storm's gonna keep coming, so I think this is a really good opportunity to think differently about that shoreline and make it stable and sustainable and make it, look really nice too, so. That's my encouragement for you.
Because.
We
you
can't
know,
close anyways, because we have no DEP and no heritage or anything, so.
Because even when you come down the hill, which you're not even shown in the pictures, that, which is kind of grass there,
Yeah,
that's got that's kind of wearing away too.
yeah, where we walk down
Where
instead
we
of
walk
going
down.
down the stairs.
That's the real low point in the road
Yeah.
as the water comes.
Oh, is that where
It
okay.
drops into that hole. But
You
now
are
that
proposing a little
slope,
grading up there, yeah.
that slope I see is, as a pretty stable slope.
Right.
3 to 1, so as you get towards the deck area, the top of
Yeah.
bank juts out, and it's a much steeper slope there. It does take expertise on getting the
That's a good point, though, really. I mean, that,
together.
to the right, to this side of the deck, it's really no different, I would think, than the rest of the hill.
Well,
That they should be, you should be able to stabilize it in some way, just the way
What
the rest of
happens
the.
is that top of bank juts out quite a bit closer to the pond there, so then that same height closer to the pond is creating a steeper slope.
Mhm.
So whereas the slope on that, the grass kind of walkway there is an easily stable slope. But once we get rid of once we're able to shed the water down, keep going down the road to the natural area past the deck and stuff, then that dig out, won't be draining the road there, because the road does keep slanting downhill. It's just that area has a low point.
Well, there is a note on the plan where that area is gonna be filled and elevated, so that's not a bad thing. That would certainly deter that washout.
Yeah, just trying to stabilize it with just the two
Yep.
sides there. And what would just fill in what had washed out.
Right.
And then right along the road, just 2 feet right along the road, raising, doing a natural berm there just to keep the water going down to where, past the deck, where it is stable, can absorb the water.
Well, that makes sense.
When would you like to continue to?
2 weeks.
Okay. So it's May 15th? Okay, so that's the one issue we have. Anything else? Okay. Well, I move that we continue the notice of intent for 0 Sequotum Road until May 15th.
Second.
Seconded by Jim. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Oh,
Thanks.
yeah, I see on the plan, I wasn't looking at the plan, I was just looking at the pictures there, doing that pine tree down there.
Okay, next we have a notice of intent for 4 Shady Drive, proposal for a new dwelling and appurtenances.
Mr. Chairman, they would like continuance until May 15th to properly notify abutters.
Okay, we're getting busy on the 15th.
And we've already have a lot of files for new ones.
Oh, boy. Okay, well, I move we continue 4 Shady Drive to May 15th.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Stan. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries. And so next we have a notice of intent for 5 Fiddler's Landing, installation of a rock revetment.
Thank you, and you can use that if you want, drag it closer.
Good evening. My name is Charlie Agro. I'm an engineer with Coastal Engineering, representing the councilmen, the owners at 5 Fiddler's Landing. The proposed project is to construct a rock revetment along the shorefront of the property. That property is located along Island Harbor. And on the property is a dwelling that was built in 1969, so it's a pre-78 dwelling, eligible for protection by a coastal engineered structure. And on the property right now, or next door to the property, there's an existing timber bulkhead, and adjacent to that timber bulkhead, the coastal bank shows signs of significant erosion. There's about a 3-foot scarp in the area south of the existing deck, or existing dock. area to the north of the dock doesn't show severe signs of erosion currently. There are some minor signs of slumping towards the toe of the bank. The proposed project is to construct a low-profile revetment that'll be exposed rock to the south of the dock, and towards the north of the dock, it'll actually taper into the existing grade where it'll be completely covered to where it ends 15 feet to the south of the property line. Also proposed is a 5-foot buffer strip along the top of the revetment to create a natural fence to keep people along the lawn and off the bank itself. And above the revetment, we're proposing to regrade and replant with native Cape Cod grass, and that regrading will limit the amount of water flowing down the bank. Is one of the things I observed, bless you, one of the observations I made on the site is that a lot of the erosion that's going on is top to bottom, which is caused by storm water flow down the bank. This regrading of the lawn will slow the water flow going down the bank and actually allow the water to seep through the bank and filter out through the rocks before it gets its way to the salt marsh. The coastal resource areas on this project are the coastal bank, the beach, and the salt marsh. The coastal bank is not a sediment source in this case, and so it only serves to as upland protection, and the construction of a revetment will further serve to protect the coastal bank. There is a coastal beach area seaward of the coastal bank, and as previously stated, there's a timber bulkhead in this area that's already possibly causing some erosion. So the formation of a coastal or of a revetment shouldn't affect the erosion of the coastal bank in this area. And in this area, the revetment would be covered and replanted, which will counter the effect of typical revetments that are not covered, that allow waves to hit the revetment and cause more reflection. So by recovering the revetment and matching the slope that's already there now, the project would not change the water circulation or increase wave run-up or wave deflection, and therefore increasing wave energy in the area. So again, not affecting the coastal beach in this area. The salt marsh, similar to the coastal beach, since the revetment is proposed to be covered, there will not be an effect to the wave run-up, wave reflection that would cause any change to water circulation or wave energy in the area of the salt marsh. The project in this area, the revetment would kind of act as a retaining wall, which again would slow the water flow down in towards the salt marsh. There's some signs, especially in this area, at where the toe of the bank is eroding. Some of that sediment is making its way towards the salt marsh and eventually towards the water body, the navigational waterway of Allen Harbor. And I'd be happy to answer any other questions at this point.
Thank you. Any comments for us, Amy?
Yeah, a couple comments. So Charlie and I met out on site the other day, which was, I think, really good. And I bounced some of these ideas off of him as well. So of concern here, we have two resource areas. We have a coastal bank as well as salt marsh, and we have a little coastal beach too. The house is pre-78, so they are allowed to, request and get vetted for a coastal engineered structure, a hard structure. But you're supposed to also prove that through alternatives that a softer solution wouldn't be effective. So in certain areas here, I think maybe some of the rock could actually potentially in the future be a damage to the salt marsh on the north side, but potentially assist on the south side near where the bulkhead meets it. So again, it's kind of what we were talking about in a couple projects today, more of a hybrid type approach to think about. So no portion of a project is supposed to have an adverse impact to salt marsh. When you put, even though the bank is not considered a sediment source as we see out there, there is small amounts of erosion there. And actually salt marsh does routinely need a little bit of sediment covering it in order to maintain the height of a salt marsh. So starving that completely wouldn't be in the benefit of the marsh, and also salt marsh really greatly protects the bank and the property itself. But That being said, more of a hybrid approach, I don't think a fiber roll or an envelope would work in this location. Where on the north side of the dock, it would be really a challenge to keep it covered, and it's almost as invasive to put in. So, but in that area, your slope is more gradual, I think, with maybe some additional plantings, maybe some regrading, as we were talking about, because there is a lot of top-down erosion there. You could improve that stability, while maybe under the dock and heading towards the timber bulkhead, a harder structure. We were talking on site today, toe stones or some sort of array with invasive removal, because all that bank is invasive and that root system is not helping the stability. Maybe some invasive removal and some native planting on that end, and then have that taper down to the natural planting could be an idea that I have.
Now, when you say toe stones, you're saying maybe some toe stones, some additional protection in this area as well?
I'll
Or-
leave that to the commissioner who kind of spoke to it. If you, I wasn't thinking, I'd like to see the idea fleshed out. I'm not saying it's gonna work.
Right.
You guys are the engineers.
Yeah,
But north of the dock, is there a need for any stone?
right. Now, I understand, what you're saying, and our idea is basically to kind of peel back the bank and open it up and place the rock there, and then kind of put the, sediment back to where it was and revegetate it with some better, more native vegetation on the bank itself, on the face of the bank, and then replant the top of the bank. As you said, it's all invasives up there. So basically, from about, maybe 5 or so feet north of the deck, it would be covered. So maybe a condition as in that needs to remain covered, and if it was eroded, which, I mean, the bank's subject to erosion right now, bringing sand back or bringing, sediment back towards the salt marsh, like you said, if it's covered, that coverage would still be allowed to migrate towards the salt marsh, and then it would just have to be maintained, and you have to recover it as well over time. But in this area, the bank is only 14.2 feet away from the corner of the building, and there's no signs of current erosion, but it is kind of alarmingly close there.
Yeah.
And so being covered and maybe conditioning it to be continued to cover, it could be an idea.
It is something to think about. I think a lot of erosion on that side, that north side, is top down. Most of it, not all of it, but most of it.
All right, thanks, Amy. Good comments. Paula, do you want to start?
No, I'm going to let Mark talk, because he was the one that talked about the toe stones.
Where are you suggesting the sediment is coming from now? On the beach area? Are you suggesting that it washes down under the existing dock and then scatters out to the
So more so just,
little area?
yeah, just more so in the toe of the bank in this area. There's like a 6-inch or so scar. Me and Amy were out there at low tide. It was actually the first time I really got to see it that well. And there's a small scarp, and there's some like brown lines you can see right in the area near the dock that looks like it's kind of dirt moving towards the marsh itself. And so, again, you don't want to starve off the salt marsh, but by preventing a large amount of erosion would, decrease the possibility of covering the salt marsh or sediment moving into the harbor as well.
So do you feel that's coming out of that bank right there?
On a small level currently, yes. And it's hard to tell, where the beach is, coming from, where that sand is.
Yeah. I mean, when I looked at it today, I wasn't necessarily convinced that there was a particular issue on the north side of the pier that's there, but the south side's a different story. That's clearly working its way in. I mean, my first thought was to do a baseline of toe stones and maybe beef the bank a little bit and then plant it similar to what you're suggesting, but maybe not quite as severe. To me, it doesn't seem like the necessity of such a large structure is warranted.
Now, it kind of looks larger than, it will look when it's out there, because these toe stones, they're completely buried. So from there, it's only 2 or 3 stones up the slope. So, it's it's deceiving there because those toe stones are large, but they go into the ground.
Right, well, the profile, I mean, to make it all work, the profile is pretty accurate, but, nonetheless, it looks to me like that might be a little bit more involved than would be necessary. So that was my suggestion, to just maintain the toe stones and perhaps a second course, and then beef up with plantings over the top, and I'm of the belief that that would suffice.
Thank you.
Okay. Stan?
Looking around without having any comparison, when I look around the harbor, it doesn't look to me like a lot of erosion tends to go on there. Now, the one area north of the dock, definitely because of that timber wall there, seems to be encouraging the erosion there. You mentioned 14 feet from the house south of the wall or north of the wall?
That's in the north of the wall.
Deck, or not? So.
I'm sorry, north of the dock.
I mean, everybody, I think, is kind of agreement, something's going on north of the dock, that we need to do something about, but south of the dock.
South, opposite direction.
South of the dock.
I understand, yeah.
North of the dock, I'm not convinced that anything's going on really excessive that needs to be changed from maybe maybe through some planting and grading. And one way to, it's not severe, so, I mean, I don't see, is the bank even receding? How do we know? I mean, at this point, I'm not convinced that erosion is going anywhere. So one way to measure it is take a baseline over time to see if there is any erosion going on. And again, south of the dock, that's another question. I think there needs to be something done there, but north of the dock, I'm not convinced that anything excessive is going on there.
Right, and one of their goals is to, for this part, is to act as a retaining wall, because in this area, the small strip of lawn that's like 5 feet wide or so is sloping down, and when it's wet out, it gets a little slippery, and they got kids kind of running around. So that's kind of the other aspect as well. They're looking for, some kind of, something to retain the slope in there, which would, I believe, serve to slow rainwater down. So if maybe a smaller retaining wall with vegetation in front of it in the area.
Well, you can have vegetation without a wall.
Right.
So I'm not convinced we need to be doing anything from a hard structure at this point. Not as far as north of the dock.
Yeah, I generally agree with that approach. It seems pretty clear that you're gonna have to do some stone revetment work from the timber bulkhead to the pier. It seems to me like it could be tapered in that area, and then the area to the north could be dealt with grading, planting, maybe some buffer planting on the top to prevent the top down, and maybe some additional planting on the bank itself. That salt marsh seems to be protecting it. The bank looks pretty good. So I would be more supportive of a plan that had a smaller tapered rock revetments south of the pier.
Thank you. Okay, thanks. So I agree with the comments. I think maybe coming back with some revisions and maybe a little more depth to the alternative analysis to show what could be done instead. And I think all the comments have been said. I'd be concerned about salt marsh impacts north of the dock as well, to make it difficult to permit. So what would you like to do? Come back in 2 weeks, a month?
Well, it sounds like you guys are getting pretty loaded up on the 15th. I think I've got something else going on the 15th, so maybe
June 5th?
June 5th?
Yeah, because we have a five Wednesday month, but we don't meet on the fifth Wednesday for next month, so it would be June 5th.
Okay.
Any
And I'm
comments?
happy to speak with you and the property owner too.
Okay. Any comments from the audience on this proposal? No? Okay.
June 5th.
Okay, I move that we continue the proposal for 5 Fiddler's Landing until June 5th.
Second.
Seconded by Mark. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. Good night.
Okay.
Can we, as we normally do, can we skip around a little bit?
Yeah.
Um,
We've got 2 extensions before us.
Yeah, so can we do the extension request for Oyster Creek first?
Yeah, that's right there on the agenda, so let's do that.
Oh, yeah, it is right there.
Yeah.
Look at that. For once, it's in
Next, we
order.
have a request for extension of a permit for Oyster Creek preservation on maintenance dredging. Good evening.
Good evening. Arlene Wilson, AM Wilson Associates, for Oyster Creek Preservation Trust here. The trust obtained an order of conditions from this board in December 7th, actually, of 2016. And once we got that, we prepared a joint Chapter 91 401 application. The 401 group, which is the group that reviews water quality related to dredging, is chronically understaffed and not really suited to overtime. The other thing that happens there is that any governmental project immediately goes to the top of the list, and so private dredging projects sort of sit.
Yeah.
It took 20 months for them to issue the permit. The Corps of Engineers will accept your application but doesn't really do their in-depth review until after the 401 permit is issued. And so in spite of everybody's best efforts, the Corps permit did not issue until mid-January of this year. And they introduced one quirk into the project in the past, because this is a maintenance project. We have had a brief window in late spring, early summer, so the last couple of weeks of May into the first week of June, we've been able to dredge. And that was what we were hoping we would be able to do for this year. However, the Corps decided that they would wipe that window out. And so the earliest that we can start dredging is the 1st of November. And considering weather and all kinds of other quirks, we thought it best if we could prevail upon the board to give us an extension, just in case everything doesn't come together perfectly and we have to carry this over for one more year to get the work done.
Thank you. Amy, thoughts on this?
So in Dropbox, I put, I didn't make copies of all the old plans and everything, but I put it in your Dropbox account. And it is, I mean, through no fault of their own that was held up. And we understand, because even here at the town, like for Saquatucket Harbor, even though we're a government agency, it took an awful long time for us to get a 401 water quality certification. We were up against timelines.
Right.
So, are you asking for so your permit expires in December of this year?
Correct.
So you're way ahead of the game, which is good, to ask for an extension.
Figure we might as well do it while
Yeah.
we.
Are you
while we're
looking
thinking
for a
about it.
year? Are you looking for 2 years, 3 years?
We'd like 3 years,
Okay.
so that we can do the dredging, do the follow-up survey,
Right, that's
Take-
correct. You need
take
to do
the following year and make sure that everything is holding together and that the depth is being
Okay.
maintained. And that we don't need to clean it up again within the limits of the permit.
Understood. That makes sense. I don't really have any comments.
Okay, thank you. Paul, any
No.
thoughts?
No, I would be in support of an extension myself.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I would be in support of an extension. I don't see why not.
Okay.
Same here, like, what you said, it's really not through their fault that they were held up, so I'm in support of that.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Okay.
So for 3 years.
I'm just looking at the order right now, just seeing on, is there any timing related to the as-built plan? I would,
Post-dredge survey,
yeah, I'd want to see that done as soon as possible after the work was done.
usually it's within
Supposed
30
to be
days.
within 30 days.
30 days.
I think that's also gonna be a chapter 91 requirement,
Yes,
it's
it
not
is.
just conservation.
Yeah, the 401
And the 401.
requires
Yes,
it.
yep, it's in there.
Within
Yep,
30
special
days.
condition number 11.
And the order also required the provision of $2,000 a year for several
Shellfish.
years for shellfish, and the first of those
Yep.
payments was made to the town recently.
Yep, it has been deposited.
Number 6 on there.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I remember this one. Any thoughts on the channel? Any changes since this was permitted? Any, additional shoaling? Any feedback in that regard?
The landowners along the shore are quite concerned about getting their boats in and out of there for this boating season.
Yeah, last year I got a ton of calls asking,
Right.
and they said it's really hard to get in there at low tide.
So the answer is it's getting narrower, Brad.
Mm-hmm. I think this one had a little piece of improvement dredging, is that correct?
What we did, and I've got some copies of the plan.
Excuse me, pardon me.
I could knock everything apart here.
Still hurt
So
yourself.
what we did was to relocate the channel a little bit
I'm all set,
to
yeah.
the north
She just
side.
called so you guys could see it a little
Um,
better.
The property owners on the south side had put in a bulkhead shortly after the last set of maintenance dredging permits were done here. So we dredged this in 2009, 2010. The bulkhead on the south side went in, I think, about 2 months before the dredging was actually done. And those people continue to have erosion on their beach, which is no surprise when you put a vertical structure in. They were quite concerned, so we pushed the channel just a little bit to the north, away from them. That's the point here.
Actually, it is over here.
And toward the other side. But there isn't a lot of space there because we have to keep 25 feet from the salt marsh in order to get core permits, so not much place to go.
And we did approve that.
Yes, and this area was man-made in 1926. There was a little salt creek through a big piece of marsh, and the original developers dredged this waterway open, took the dredge spoil, put it back on the adjacent salt marshes on both sides to create the subdivision. Something clearly would turn everybody's hair white now, but in 1926, nobody thought about what the impacts of these things would be. And it actually held up for a surprisingly long time.
We also approved to extend the channel from 12 feet to 15 feet, and that was something that was discussed at length, and then we did approve it. So it'll be interesting to see, the post-dredge survey and just see how things go and then see how it sustains itself over time. But yeah, I don't object. If somebody wants to make a motion, then I think we can go forward.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the request for extension of permit for the Oyster Creek preservation for maintenance dredging.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Stan. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
Please sign.
Hey, we approved something.
Hey, look at that. I knew tonight was gonna be a night of continuances. Things weren't quite ready.
Yeah.
Can we jump to discussion item for Mr. Safran at
Sure.
177 Forest Street?
Sure.
Hi, I'm Steve Safran, the owner of 177 Forest Street. Most of you have been on the property because there was a meeting there. At one time, we decided to have the mitigation 500 square feet in the back of the property and then 500 closer to the barn. I'm requesting a one-year extension because I basically broke my ankle in September and I wasn't able to complete the work. We did have it flagged off, both pieces, and I did have Nick come from
Crawford Land Management.
Nick Crawford from Crawford Land Management. He came and saw it, and we discussed doing something, but we did not actually start it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm requesting a 1 year's extension to get through this year's planting cycle, so he can renovate the two pieces and do the planting before the end of the planting season. So I'm requesting a 1 year extension.
Thank you.
So we're here because technically, through maybe some miscommunication, that Steve's permit expired in March of this year. So the permit was for the demolition of 2 additions, reconstruct a new foundation under the house and additions, new breezeway, and install the gas line. So I know you're underway with that right now. The 1 year extension would, and excuse me, when we met the other day, I thought you were asking for, gonna be wanting a 3-year extension.
Well, maybe I'm being too optimistic.
No,
I
I think
3-year.
I think starting with 1 year and showing some progress would be a start. So right now, so your extension wouldn't just encompass your plantings. Right now, if you're doing work on the home, which I saw you doing the other day, you're technically doing it without a permit right now from conservation because it's expired. So you don't just need a 1 year you don't need an extension just for the plantings, you'd need an extension for the construction work, and do you foresee that being done within the year?
Yes, I do. If things go according to plan. One of the things I have issue with, because if you don't get within a certain timeline for contractors, if you have a delay of a couple months, they don't automatically do it. The next
They're
opening
on their
is
next
when
job,
you,
yeah.
So I'm very optimistic about that.
So the planting really needs to be done this spring,
This
because the planting was as a result of a
Yep,
violation,
mitigation,
of a
yep.
mitigation for
mitigation
an
planting.
expansion of what you were permitted, so.
Yep.
I'd really like to see some progress I wanna see some priority made towards the planting.
Sure.
Because we did, we granted you a permit for an addition and a substantial
Yep.
enlargement. So, I'd really like to see some effort made towards the planting, if we do allow the extension. So it is expired, so it's been about a month, it's about a month expired, so we're not that far out from the expiration. You can grant an extension once it's expired, if it's like within a short period of time after expiration that he's requesting it.
And I did go see Amy 2 weeks ago too, so I had just missed the expiration date when I went to see you.
We didn't talk 2 weeks ago. I think it was Nikki. I don't remember.
No,
We
we
talked.
sat down, and that's when you told me it was
Oh,
expired.
yes. Yes. Yeah, he sat down. That's right. And I told him to come here. It was last week or the week before, yeah.
So can you explain a little bit further, Amy, about the work that's going on right now that's wouldn't be authorized? Is it
So-
construction on the
Yes.
buildings?
Once a project expires, technically you're working without a permit. Whether you want to, if it's a violation, whatnot, but the permit's expired, it's not an active permit. So, it's work on the addition to the house.
Basically, I'd already contracted with these people to start, and they were in process.
Mm-hmm.
When I found out I should not be doing it.
Yeah.
They are doing the roof,
Mhm.
and it's like,
Yeah.
you know, I tell them to stop, and then maybe get them in 5 or 6 months, you know, because of the windows. But they're
understand.
moving right along, and I did not realize when I had them, a contract with them there, that I was in violation.
And so the mitigation planning, that was done in lieu of a fine, I believe?
There were fines in addition.
Yeah, both.
It was $600.
And the plantings have nothing to do with this permit. I mean,
Well, he had,
No.
yes, so the permit for the original house, or for the original work, you were required to do a small amount, like 200-something square feet of mitigation planting. But once the foundation was poured, it was, 6 feet wider.
Yes, I
than it-
realized it was a lot bigger.
Yeah, it was bigger, and so that's where the 1,000 square feet of mitigation came in, because it was like 300 some odd square feet of new
Additional,
foundation
yeah.
addition. So there was the original requirement of about 200 square feet, I have to check, for mitigation. And then this happened, and so we had more.
It's just under 1,000 feet, but I just say 1,000 for,
Right, it just makes easy for rounding
now we're
up.
talking about the ones we looked at last year, the 1,000 feet that we were
Mhm,
gonna
The
do.
2 areas,
when
yep.
you were there, that's where you looked at both above
Right.
and below, yeah.
And that was, you needed the permit for him to complete that?
He had the permit to complete that.
I just did not,
It's expired now.
Right, that's what I'm saying, that fell under the permit?
Yes.
Because even though it was
It was part of this
Okay.
file. It was
Okay.
part of his it became part of his file.
So there is something like 1,200 square feet of remediation planting that is required to be done that has not been done. Do I have that right?
that is correct, it's been flagged
It has
where
not
it
been
needs to be done.
And there is construction going on the house right now
Mm-hmm,
that was permitted but is no longer permitted
correct.
because the permit is
Because the
expired.
permit's
And I-
expired.
I
And
didn't
what
realize
is
that.
that construction work? It's putting on a new roof or what?
Well, it's addition onto the old house. And,
Well, you just said it was a roof, so I'm trying.
well, no, the
So-
addition,
I'll
the
explain.
roof on the addition is what they're working on.
You weren't, I don't think, on the board when this originally
I wasn't.
permitted. So I'll pass this over to you. So essentially,
I did go to the site, however.
yeah,
and-
so where the barn is, and then there was a dwelling north
Yeah.
of that. I'll pass this over to you. So he removed like the center section
Right.
and then reconstructed in the middle. So it's a large addition is what it is. You can see that if you
That's
want.
what's being worked on.
And that's what's being worked on right now.
And because, and it again affected with my broken ankle, I was not, once I got approval for everything,
Yeah.
within a week and a half, I broke my ankle before I could talk to the steel guy and the framer. So everything waited until winter. Mid-July, I mean, I'm glad,
That plan doesn't show the plantings, but it just shows the
No.
footprint.
But I guess my question, why has not the mitigation proceeded? I mean, we've had so many discussions on this, and Nick
has
Crawford was the
proceeded
one who was
to the
gonna
point-
do it, so I don't know what that has to do with anything else. If he was gonna do it,
He should have done it.
He should have done it
Crawford Land Management.
Right.
I did not get a chance to meet with them to actually start the mitigation.
Why?
Why not? I broke an ankle and I just was immobile. And I didn't want to face them until I could walk around my property.
But he'd been seeing the property. He put together the plan, and the plan was staked off as to the areas to be
staked.
done. Right, that's what I'm
Vicky,
saying.
myself, and
We
Steve
did-
staked the
Amy
area, we
went out
did.
there, the area was staked off as to what was agreed upon, so I don't understand why that couldn't have
And the
proceeded to.
plants that were called out for what the plant should have been.
Right. I thought I had more time than I did,
Mhm.
that's all.
I guess I think we all should chime in on this, but I don't really support an extension till the plantings are done. We've been talking a lot.
You need
meeting-
something in order
But
to do the
Amy, so
plants.
need
You
something
need
to
That's what I
something
was
to
asking,
do
does
the
that fall
plantings.
under that?
He can't even do that?
Well, you could allow him to do that, but
Boy, just one thing after another.
I think a 1 year is reasonable.
Well, I think it would be reasonable if there had been any progress, but, I mean, we've had so many discussions about this and nothing's been done in terms of the planting plan.
Do you have it scheduled for the spring, the planting?
This season I did talk to Nick when he came over and actually looked at what was going on, but nothing specific.
I'd like to suggest that we defer this, and you can bring in us a schedule, a date, something from the contractor saying exactly when he's gonna do it, and then we can talk about
Oh, fair enough.
what's gonna happen. I don't
Like-
think there's any point in us
like-
just giving you another year without anything definite.
Yeah, but I'm going back to what Amy, what you were saying as to whether we grant this within a relatively quick time period.
I mean, you don't have to grant a year, you can grant,
No, I
6
mean,
months or
as
something.
to when we can grant this extension.
yeah, it's generally within 30 days, which we're just over that now.
That's
so.
what I'm getting at. If we go beyond this, granting anything, then we,
Well, no, you just have a certain amount of time to act on an extension after it expires.
right, that's what I'm getting.
Right,
And that's
That's
30
what-
days.
which we're right at right now. We're actually over it.
We're over.
We're over it.
So really,
We need to do something, or,
we're over. I mean,
Right.
so.
So the other thing is, and explain this too, is like technically you could have to file a brand new notice of intent to start over again. Personally, I really wanna see, I think we all do, wanna see some planting get done this spring. All the planting get
So-
done this spring that is needed to get done. So, in order to do that, go ahead, John, sorry.
Can I suggest that we could consider granting a year's extension conditioned on the agreed-upon planting be completed by, I don't know, some very near-term date, like June 30th or something like that?
Let me,
Well, I
let
gotta-
me talk to my contractor
I got a better
and
extension.
get dates.
I got a better idea, because you said it doesn't have to be a year, we can grant anything we want.
It doesn't have to be a year.
We can
Grant
do
a
it
2-month
for
extension?
3 months or something, make sure that should get the planting done.
Well, we gotta see some see some
That's what I'm
progress.
saying, I wanna see
We haven't been getting
I
the
wanna
monthly
see the
progress
progress
reports
on the
either.
planting done.
Why don't I meet with Crawford,
Mhm.
get commitments from him on the different steps and dates.
Yeah, we're not talking the phases that he was doing, it's just the planting that
That's the mitigation, yeah, not the phases at all.
yeah.
Do we have an adequate plan of the mitigation plantings? I know there was a sketch with things drawn over the plan.
I have it,
Is it adequate?
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, it shows the areas, it's something that I can talk to Crawford and Steve about getting started.
Yeah.
It's just-
I'm concerned because we've done this discussion item thing several times. This is not a scheduled hearing, this is
Right.
after the fact, it's after 30 days, it's a discussion item tacked on the end of our agenda.
Mhm.
This is not the way I'd like to see things go.
we found out about this after the agenda had been ready. So we were able to put it as a discussion item, but I couldn't technically put it as an extension request because
He didn't file.
I didn't know, well, right, but I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't know how it was gonna go, whether you
How-
were gonna grant one or not.
How will this relate to the work in the buildings?
That's up to you. I mean, if you grant an extension, it encompasses all the work.
Yeah,
And they can't do the plantings without doing an extension.
yeah.
Which is I would suggest, I don't know what the contractor, how long your construction project?
Crawford, oh, you
No,
mean the
forget
construction project itself?
Yeah, how long is that gonna take to finish?
It should be within 6 or 8 months, because
Okay,
I
if we
have,
grant like a 3-month extension, he should have the plantings done within the 3 months, in my opinion.
Just till August 1st.
until,
Right.
but if
Until August
Crawford
No, I'm
Land
saying
Management
3
is not available,
What, that's
I've been
not,
running into problems with that, with my,
There's other contractors. So it's to do planting. It's not, so there's a lot of companies that can plant.
okay,
I would give a very shortened timeline that doesn't allow him to complete the construction project, but it allows him to get the planting done.
Well, I also, since there is progress on the construction going on that I can see now, I would hesitate, wouldn't wanna stall that either, cause then it would just get
No, but
put
it
off
allows
for
him
more
to-
years after.
It allows him
you
to continue that, to
Right.
see that we get the,
Right. Okay,
get the plantings done.
okay,
But if it doesn't get done, because we've been told so many times we're gonna get it done,
Yep.
and it hasn't been, if he doesn't do it, then the
Yeah.
construction stops.
yeah.
at
It's,
3 months.
Sure.
land
That's what I would
management-
recommend.
you don't need necessarily, and Crawford, does good work, but I wouldn't, to just do plantings, you don't need a land management company. A landscaping company, which we have a list of,
oh, a whole bunch, yeah.
can do that. Maybe it might be more cost effective, we don't know.
Sure.
But, there are other contractors who can do the work.
Oh, I'll change my opinion with 3 months, because we're already a month into the 3 months at this point, because we're granting it from March 31st, right?
No, it would be effective the day yes, actually.
Yeah,
it
so if
would
I
be.
say a 3-month extension, we've already gone 1 month, is
You
what
can
I'm
just
saying.
say by a date. You can give a date for it. If you wanted to say August 1st for the plantings, you can give a date.
I mean, that would be my recommendation.
And what would the duration be for the building work?
No, we
It
would
would
have
have to be revisited at that point for
Right.
the building work.
So we'd have a hearing for an extension
Yes.
request?
at that
Yes.
point.
so the hearing would be maybe the second hearing in July, right?
Yes,
So that, I mean, we wouldn't wait until August 1st to figure out whether
Right,
that
right, we
happened,
gotta
right?
extend it before that.
mm-hmm.
And we're not in jeopardy of going way past the 30 days on that work?
I think the DEP is not going to, we have the ability to offer extensions.
We're right, like-
DEP is not gonna flag this.
Like you said, we're right about, I mean, it's like 31 days or something. You said March 31st, right?
No, it was March 23rd.
Oh,
No,
So it's-
we're over.
It's,
We're absolutely over.
yeah.
So you're concerned that we're acting out of the box by granting it? I mean,
We're acting out of the box.
we're jeopardizing ourselves by doing this?
Well, I want to make sure it's okay to do that because the permit is expired, and I'm also very conscious this project has had just
Yeah, yeah.
repeated problems from day
Right.
one, and I'm really concerned about it. I don't think the mitigation's been a priority for this project. You know, we've had plans approved, and what's been constructed is not what's been approved, so, you know, certainly, and I don't, you know, I'm not thrilled about having this as a discussion item either. You know, we spend a lot of time on projects that have been queued up for a hearing.
Mhm.
So,
What do you wanna do?
I think somebody should make a motion and we should have some discussion.
no?
I'll make a motion. I'll make
Thank
a
you.
motion to approve an extension until 1st of August for this permit.
With any conditions?
I mean, what are the conditions? The conditions will occur when the extension expires.
No, the planting's gotta get done.
Plantings.
Well, the planning has to be
Our
done
reason for extending it to August 1st on
Okay,
a short
sure.
term is to get the plantings done.
Yep.
Otherwise,
For the-
we're not gonna get,
Progress on the
I
plantings.
assume that was,
that's kind of, I agree with you, John.
okay, conditioned on the plantings being done by August 1st.
It
And
should
I-
actually be done by June 30th.
Well, but
Or we can,
This is the
Go ahead,
planting
go ahead,
season.
John.
Well, I've made the motion,
Right,
somebody can second
I'll
it,
se-
then we
I'll-
can,
I'll
then we can
second it.
discuss it and modify
I'll
it if we
second it.
wanna modify it.
Stan seconds
but-
the motion, so we're under discussion.
I agree with John. My understanding was, my theory, giving them a 3-month extension so that the plantings could be done, knowing that at the same time, construction can continue under that permit as well. But if the planting doesn't get done, we're not gonna extend it beyond that, and no
Right.
more further construction will be done. That was my
I agree with that.
rationale in that.
All right, so we'll also have a formal request for extension
Yes.
beyond that.
Yes.
Okay.
And I would like to also stipulate that it is entirely the responsibility of the applicant to have the proper materials in place and be before us in July in order to request the extension. And if it's done after the fact, there's no way anybody is going to be cooperative.
And I'll second, and I'm mentioning that I'm kind of recommending this grudgingly because of the lack of progress on planting.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor to approve the extension for 3 months,
To August
Till
1st, to
August
August
to
1st.
August 1st. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I'm opposed.
Okay, so we have, so we're,
It's a non-action.
it's a non-action.
So then what?
What's the
Somebody-
opposition? Like, what, can we flesh out what you'd like to see?
Someone should make an alternative motion and see if we can pass that.
I can't believe we're doing this under a discussion item. It's not appropriate.
So if there is no action, what is the consequence of that?
Doesn't pass.
No,
no
I mean,
extension.
everything stops.
So then.
What has
the
to be
work-
Yeah,
done
so
going
everything,
forward.
if an extension is not granted, work stops, all work stops. A new notice of intent is filed.
Okay, would the applicant consider having a fine imposed for having your permit lapse with work being conducted and put that fine towards additional mitigation in lieu of a fine? Is that something that the applicant would consider, or is that something that the commission would consider? Is that an appropriate?
I wouldn't
it's
even
not-
call, I would not call it a fine. If you want additional mitigation as a result of going beyond your time, the permit, I would just call it mitigation.
I just feel it's not the commission's fault that the permit expired.
Yeah.
And so these things keep happening.
Mhm.
I don't know what else to say other than just refile, you know? Work stop, notice and refile.
So I have another question, which is it within the bounds of what we can do to fine the applicant for having continued to work with an expired permit?
Well, that's what I'm suggesting. And
Well, but I wouldn't be in favor of additional mitigation. I'd be in favor of just the bite of a cash fine.
Well, to
I
me,
don't,
it's a small amount. And we've all talked about that buffer zone, realizing there is a benefit to protect the resource area. It would certainly benefit the resource area to have a larger buffer zone along that strip.
I think that you've got to get the applicant to do some planting there before you talk about punishing him with asking him for more planting. I mean, he hasn't done any planting.
This has gone on a lot, so.
And so
you know.
I,
Well, I'm prepared to just end this discussion right now, because it's not an item on our agenda. He can come back before us with a request for an extension, and then we'll field that request.
So in the meantime, if any work happens,
It'd be in violation.
it's in violation.
I would request that that not be done because my current contractor is working on the roof. It's a critical item. If it was more like the walls or something else, then that's something that could, but he's on the roof now. It took me half a year to get him here, so to actually work on the roof. And I think the August 1st date is very valid. It lets me finish up the roof, basically weatherize the place. I'll get the mitigation done. I'll do the submittal by the 25th. I'm sorry, the middle of July for the extension. That's all there. I'll also just get the planning done ASAP. I'll work with the landscaper that she said she has a list. I'll get that done as soon as possible.
In my opinion, it shouldn't even have come to this, at this point. It should have all been done. You should have noticed, been aware of what your permit date was. And now there's a consequence.
the vote failed. We're done.
I think we're done
Well,
tonight.
no, I mean, there's just, it's a non-action.
It's
It's
a-
not a not approved or a
Well,
not,
it
it's a
hasn't been
But for
non-action.
tonight, I think we're done.
The permit's expired,
Okay.
right? I mean, that's what you were saying,
Yeah, I don't know.
because it didn't pass.
Yeah, I don't know what else to say.
So what do you instruct me to do as your agent?
I think we need to issue a stop order for any work on the property.
Why can't we issue something that says he needs to have planting done?
We were,
We've got May is a planting time, and June.
we were trying
That's
to,
what
May-
that
trying to
was.
do that, you voted
Not
against
until
it.
August. I don't think it should go until
No,
August.
no, he has till August. We're
No, I
granting,
think
Okay.
his planting should be done now.
Paula?
I agree.
suggest you make such a motion, and if someone seconds it, we can vote on that motion and see if it gets any
That's
further than what I
effectively
made.
what John and I and
It's the same motion.
Mark were voting for. It's
Yeah.
the same thing that we were asking. He had till August 1st to get the planting done, but yeah, realistically, he had to do it before that.
Should be done before that.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion that planting should be done no later than June 30th, before we discuss an extension of building.
Yeah, no.
Why? Why can't we,
Any extension includes building.
does it have to include
Yes.
building? Until the work is done?
I really,
The permit includes building and planting, based on what Amy's told
well, the
us.
plant,
The
so
planting should have been done.
I know.
the planting was part of an enforcement action.
That's
The
right.
building is a separate file, but but the planting is in result of exceeding his permit. So it's all tied, it's tied to the permit. I don't know the answer to, I don't know if we can split it. Off the top of my head, I don't.
Have you been by to see the status of the roof?
Drove by the other day. I don't remember particularly. No, I haven't stopped.
Yeah, I'm just curious about, the status of the roof.
I would like to say I support the June
You were in the
30th,
middle of a motion too, so.
because that will allow me to complete the roof,
Yeah,
get everything done, so it's not
probably
open
won't
to the
get the
elements.
planting though, but the roof will be done.
The roof will be done before that.
That's my point. And the planting probably won't get
Well,
done
you-
based on past.
Let me
Hold on,
say,
you have a motion on the table.
I haven't called for a second yet, so
when I'm saying
Did you even
the
finish what
thing,
you were gonna say?
the contractor is currently working on the roof.
Just begin.
I don't have to line someone up or contract with someone from the beginning. as long as Amy said I could do any landscaper, I'm very happy with that. I thought Crawford had to do the whole thing. I can easily get someone, a landscaper, to do the planting, starting right away, I think. I mean, so we'll see, but I think June 1st is a valid date.
Paula, do you want to have your motion considered?
No, just go ahead with, go ahead.
I have a question. Would we consider increasing the mediation space by 50%?
Well, that's why I offered the fine as a concept, and that would be just $300 towards additional plants, which would not be a square footage that was that large. 50% obviously would be fantastic, but I don't think that'd be compatible with his property plans. That's a lot.
But additional planting for 300, I think, is valid.
300 square feet or $300?
$300
Oh.
towards planting.
Yeah, that's nothing.
That's nothing.
No. Amy, if we go back though, if we drop it tonight, then this isn't just coming back to revisit it 2 weeks from now or a month from now, because now it's definitely expired, right?
Well, it's expired already.
It's expired, so regardless of whether you act, I mean,
It should have been a request for extension
But
on
if
a
we
hearing.
go further out than what we've already had, you kind of said, well, as long as we're soon.
I don't know how it would,
Okay.
I don't know how
Okay.
it would go. I just wanna know, like, come tomorrow, like, am I issuing a stop work? Am I gonna be visiting this property to ensure that no work's being done? What are there fines being issued, or are we going to give, is there, to get, I just wanna see some ability to get the planting done. But
Right.
that's me.
Right,
It is
no,
your decision.
I know, it's a good recommendation. I think, it was a vote came to the table, and it was a draw, so that's what happens, and I'm very concerned about the idea of doing this outside of a scheduled hearing for a request for an extension. I don't think that's the right way to do this. We all have an interest in seeing the planting done. The proponent has an interest in seeing his roof completed.
Mhm.
I mean, that's legitimate.
What if he filed for a request for extension for the next hearing?
It's just it's a couple pages, page
Yeah,
form.
so I'm just saying if he came before us 2 weeks from now, at it for a hearing for an extension, we'd have to figure out whether or not we're even allowed to.
In the meantime,
Do
stop
that.
work.
Well, not necessarily, but,
Well, yeah,
um,
unless you
Well-
set an extension tonight.
Then technically it isn't, it's expired, you can, it's technically a violation if you wanted to treat it as such. If you wanted to mandate that he applies for an extension for the next meeting and let him still continue doing work for 2 weeks, I don't know.
I'll make a proposal. I think that I'd like to see him come back as soon as he can with a formal request for an extension, and that we allow him to complete the roof. I'd hate to see the roof damaged because of some
Okay.
Thank you.
event.
Okay.
But
Comment.
I do think that we should seek some type of mitigation response for the lapsing permit. We all deal with permits all the time in our lives. We know when these things are coming due. To me, it's not like it should be fully excusable. And so I guess we should think about an appropriate response to that. And I think, I don't know if a fine is appropriate or just an additional percentage increase.
Something to think about, because you're gonna see it again with the formal request, so it's something to think about how you wanna handle it.
Okay, so would the motion be a request to allow the finishing of the roof? And then,
I would say the motion will be to have Mr. Saffron file their extension request within the week, so that we get, it's not hard, it's like 2 pages.
Yep.
File the extension request within the week to get on the May 15th meeting, because the agenda has not closed for that yet.
okay,
The legal ad has, but this doesn't have to be on a legal ad. and let him continue with the roof.
Is
And,
it-
and I
I'd like
think
to-
there's something positive to get
I'd
a
like to add
landscaper in.
something.
Yes, and if we could
I want to be
see some
proactive on that.
progress,
He's
that would
talked
be
to
wonderful.
somebody and has a plan to proceed with planting.
Stan would
Well,
like
he
to...
was just saying that too. He
Okay.
was saying
It-
he's gonna
yeah.
try to contract a landscaper to get that moving.
I think you're gonna have a hard time getting the extension without without being able to provide us with a solid plan, a starting date for the planting at that hearing.
Okay.
It was a 3-3
It's
vote
just-
tonight, as it is, and so I think that's pretty important.
Mhm.
And we'll discuss additional mitigation at that hearing.
Okay.
So,
That works.
okay,
So you have a motion, that's your motion, is to do a formal extension request,
right.
With,
and let you do continue going with the roof.
with a plan for planting
Yes, so,
included at the time, as part of that.
And we'll expect to have it done with a similar timetable, what people discussed earlier. So that's the motion. Does anyone want to second that? Paul will second. Any discussion?
Again, just to specify, regarding what we're really saying about the planting plan is that you have a formal plan ready when you come before us, but that it will be completed no later than August 1st. That was my thinking.
but you want, essentially, in the next couple of weeks, you want the proof that you have somebody, that you've retained somebody to
I'll
do the
contract
work.
someone and get their dates.
Yeah,
Right.
okay.
If I'm
Yep.
hostage to their dates.
And have some
I
option.
will email you the list of,
Thank you.
people who work in the area, okay?
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries. Any abstentions or?
Thank you,
Okay, all right, thanks.
thanks. Thank you, Steve.
Oh,
Okay. Go back to the rest of the agenda. We've got 2 orders of conditions. Sent some more information off to the state about Red River. Haven't heard back, so that's since the last hearing. We sent some more off to them. Basically just, they asked about the sediment composition out there of, just to let you know what they had asked. Heritage asked for Red River Beach. They asked about the sediment at the east end of Red River Beach where the rocks were proposed. And essentially, it's, because it's deposited material, it actually is bank sand, but it's got a clifftop dune on top of it. But the resource itself is a vertical buffer banking structure. So we sent them off that type of information. We'll see what they do with it.
Can I ask you a question on that whole area? Because you're,
Sure, it's highly dynamic.
no, you're the one that explained to me that we had been putting sand in there over the years to stabilize, to
Yeah.
try and protect that bank, and that's what's been filling in the river.
Absolutely.
yeah.
And I think I asked this one other time, that if we do this, what will happen to the river? Will it open up again? Because my other
Yeah.
concern is that house that I keep pointing to in Chatham, they've been dumping sand on the beach. They did it 3 years
Yeah.
ago, and then just recently this winter,
Mhm.
and it's already half washed away that they've deposited there.
Are you thinking that sand is gonna
Isn't
migrate
the
all the
transport
way
going east?
west?
Chance? Yeah, no, I don't think that's what you're saying. I think you're just saying the sand leaves, the sand's gone.
Right, will it still go towards Red River or towards,
Chatham sand goes east,
Towards
so the longshore
towards Mama,
sediment
okay.
transport is west to east
okay,
in Nantucket Sound. Outer Cape gets a little bit more dynamic
right.
in the bay, but, no. So their sand is not, you get a little bit on the end of a big jetty like that, you do get a little bit of an eddy that creates, and sand can appear near there to move east to west, but the general dynamic is it's going.
It's like I told you
West to east.
last time, that tip of
Yeah.
the beach is migrated all the way to where it's even with the revetment, rock revetment.
Yeah, that's our sand.
Yeah, I know. It was a mooring field, it was a place you could
Yeah.
quahog. It's not anymore.
We really
Yeah.
can't say what's gonna happen in the long term, but if you stop adding more sand.
Should.
It'll-
A question on that though, has that stopped? I mean, that shouldn't have been happening.
No, it has not continued.
I mean, whether or not we lose a little bit of parking lot, we shouldn't choke off the mouth of a river.
No, it has not,
It's not choked
Oh,
off. I
just
mean,
about,
No, at
at
low
low
tide.
tide, there's
It's-
just a little
There's still a
trickle.
channel there, but that's,
Yeah,
it's
yeah, it's
always
about-
been.
No, it's changed
It's
dramatically.
changed a lot, yeah.
I've
it's
been
been
walking
like-
that beach for 20 years before I moved
All
here.
right, so I was born down the road.
yeah, the
so-
filter fabric
Yeah, 'cause
showing,
we
I
used
know
to
we
stay
haven't
at Chatham
dumped.
Tides.
Right.
Yeah, I
but it's-
mean, I don't think that any should be dumped there regardless, even if the parking lot starts falling in, it's, you can't do that. I mean,
Yep.
Like a 20-year.
I know it hasn't.
we would not be happy with a private homeowner doing that.
I've
I
been
mean,
going there for a
never.
long time.
You a long time.
Yeah, I think, Jim, it's a good point. I think we discussed it in the past, and I think we all felt that we should have permitted the revetment initially and not, be putting sand there, and then it was denied, by DP.
Yeah.
And so that set us back, and so,
I don't
But
think
there was the option
Like
of
so, no
pulling back, and I don't know if dumping the sand was the right.
I don't think it was. I don't think it, and I think we learned that, so I agree with you, and it's a good lesson, because there were resource impacts,
Yeah.
so I think we're on the right path now.
I think yeah, I agree. I think when the town started putting sand there, when it started really eroding, I don't think they realized how much you'd have to keep adding in
Yeah.
order to stave it off, and that it all was just gonna kind of create a delta there, just sit there.
Right.
So, anyway, just so wanted to let you know,
Yep.
still waiting.
Okay.
So, we do 47 North Road, the tight tank? How do you, we had a lot of discussion about the vegetation, because the 2 trees that were potentially gonna be removed. Are you okay with my language on that? It's number 5, if the work cannot be done without compromising the pitch pine and cedar tree, they may be flush cut and removed, but are not allowed to be stump ground. Oh, sorry.
I guess I'm not really
be
comfortable with the and/or applicable native plantings.
Oh, okay, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah,
I think I left that to talk about.
I'm thinking, it's only, a tree or two, but I'm thinking habitat quality, and you could have some native plantings that don't replicate that habitat quality, so I don't know if you wanna.
Do you want me to just leave cedar trees and take out the last part? Do you just want 2 cedars?
Yeah, I mean, say the cedar doesn't work out, you could make that adjustment on your own, working with them directly, couldn't you?
Yeah,
I think so. Anyone have any thoughts on that?
Oh, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, I would like to see it be,
Yeah, I'd like to
be trees and not, just some flowers or something.
Right,
yeah, no.
okay. That was my
take
only,
that off.
that was my only comment for that one.
Good, glad I asked. Anything else on that one?
Somebody want to move that we approve it?
I would move to approve the order of conditions.
Okay,
Second?
seconded by Jim. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Please sign.
Motion carries.
Seven Great Woods, I'd appreciate if you looked at it. I'm sure you already have, but this was the really involved project, and wanted to make sure I got all the pieces. I did look at the tape, too, but. We didn't really talk about a monitoring report, and so I put that in as a condition number 8. Oh, another one I thought of, sorry, I didn't think of it before, a 10, if any contractor other than Wilkinson Ecological is to do the work, they have to be approved by the Conservation Commission. It's a pretty involved plan, and it's not something that maybe every landscaper can do.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
For number 2 in the special conditions, we have a list of the native plants that we all agreed upon, don't we, or?
Yep, it's in the,
On the plans,
it's
right?
on the
Yeah,
plans,
it's
and
already-
it's in the narratives, yep.
Yep.
It just kind of references that.
Right.
Did the fall lawn regulations make it on there?
Yeah.
No fertilization, herbicides,
Number 4, yeah.
pesticides.
I actually don't have it.
I don't know if I'll put any grass that is to be replanted has to be the native mix.
Yeah, that's,
I didn't put that in, I put the,
Okay, we have a motion for the order of condition.
I move to approve the order of conditions for
great ones.
Great Woods Road.
47, no.
No,
am I
7
wrong?
Great Woods Road.
7 Great
Got
Woods,
it.
thank you.
Okay.
I'll second
The
it.
second was, all those in favor say aye.
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 Broken rubber
Motion
band.
carries.
Hang on. Oh, I don't know if that one's gonna fit. Right, a couple certs of compliance. Number one. Kathy Seifert Green, Dark Horse Realty Trust. Nikki did the site, we talked about it. So, we got everything that we asked for. We got the as-built, we got a letter from the contractor, we were able to go out and check things. She recommends a certificate of compliance. It's, on Pleasant Bay.
Do you want us to approve all three at once, if there's no issues?
You can, the only issue is, and can be done with a letter, is on the second one for Long Pond Drive,
Mm-hmm.
is the dock storage. So, that is a condition that it needs to be up. So they haven't complied with that, so
Oh,
we will, essentially, I mean, if you want me to, I'll send out a warning with in a letter, essentially, and state that they've gotta have it upland next year. But their project itself was fine. And then the last one, it's just a reissuance of the certificate of compliance, because the original went missing a while
Right.
ago.
wouldn't that be a fairly good message to, as an incentive to get them to take care of the dock, is to send that letter?
Yes, I was gonna send it with the certificate of
Oh,
compliance.
with the cert, but
Yeah.
I'm thinking of just send a
Oh.
letter without the cert.
And say that it's being withheld until they take care of that? Or we're coming into season, so
Yeah, it's kind of a weird time of year where they're gonna be putting it in anyway.
Oh, yeah.
Any time. so
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
why- What's the value to that?
I think,
I'm looking for messages for a long-standing problem.
yeah, it
Not
is.
getting compliance with the dock storage. The time of year is an important point. I mean, is it a property sale? I mean,
No,
do they not care?
it was, it was two properties that were joined to one. It's now just 148 Long Pond Drive. It was a tear down rebuild. I think they're intending to make it a year-round place soon. But I don't know, I've met with one of the homeowners, and I don't know if it was just an oversight. This was a while ago I met with him. I don't think it was intentional, but I
Yep.
think it was like just a comment, like, that's what people do, which we need to get people away from that common thought that this is an okay thing.
Yeah.
Maybe a warning letter to go with the certificate of compliance stating that if we see this, it will be a fine. And
Okay.
next time.
I think if it was salt marsh, I mean, we've been going around this for so long with salt marsh impacts, I would just not want to issue the cert. I mean, it's really,
I hear you.
the impacts are significant, they just keep happening, so I'm looking for ways to get incentives to people, so unless, how do people feel about this? I mean, it's up to you guys too.
Let me look at their language, hold on real quick, let me look at the language of their order about storage. Make sure we were clear when
I
we
mean,
issued this a few years ago,
yeah,
because
there
this
was-
was in 2014.
There was clear language,
Let's see.
then they might not
Then Could just be
compliance.
fine.
That's right.
Could withhold until the fall.
Bless you.
Thank you. When it's time to take, until they take it out of the water and put it in the proper place in the fall.
Hang on, I don't even know
Till
if
the
it's
following
necessarily in here.
That would be my motion if it was a salt marsh. In many cases with freshwater ponds, they're storing it on a modified bank or a place where the impacts aren't that significant.
It says on the upland portion of the property outside the buffer zone, and it's within the buffer zone.
Yeah, so it's up to you folks. They're technically not in compliance. But if it's on a, modified bank that has Cape Cod lawn, not a big deal. If it was a salt marsh,
I didn't see it. She says in the buffer zone. I didn't see it where exactly it is, if it's on Cape Cod lawn or if it's on native plantings, I don't know.
right, I just wanna make the point, if it was a clam flat or a salt marsh, I would not vote to approve the cert.
That's not this.
So, I don't mind it. I think you're recommending that we send a letter with a cert,
Yeah,
And-
I think with these people, I think we'd get compliance.
and that's fine.
I'll go take a look anyways, just for myself. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful property too. But, I'll go take a look and see if it's on Cape Cod lawn, and before I send the letter out, and
Yeah.
I'll probably even, on the plan, I'll sketch out where it's acceptable to go.
I feel that we're getting resistance from the contractors as well over
I think
time.
that's a large part of it.
And so I'm looking for chances to send a message.
Yep.
So, but we don't have to do it here. If folks are okay. Any thoughts? I know it's getting late.
Yeah, I think as long as we're sending a letter saying that
Put copies of it in the file.
next time
That's-
will be a
that's
fine,
That'll
and
be a fine.
Okay.
I guess
Well,
it's all right.
Yeah,
well, why don't I
would
move to approve all three certs?
It's in there.
It's right in their orders of conditions, yeah.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve all three certificates of compliance as described.
A second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Sending 3 around.
Like I said, it's no different than all the others, she's trying to get them. Yeah, and it's kind of a catch-up to try and get
It
people
is,
to-
but, technically they're not in
I
compliance.
know, I agree,
Mhm.
I agree.
Start finding the contractors.
I think so. Yeah, I do, I think so.
And 3. And the ones of these, like Dark Hollow, that's Catherine Green's property, the ones that did have conditions about irrigation fertilization, those are ongoing conditions. So, that does not expire. I think I have, I signed 2 or 3, I feel like.
This is my third.
And what is this? Hold on. Wait a minute, you're at, which one is that, Stan? Can you open that up? Oh, this is Sullivan. Is that your second or third?
This is
This
my
is
third.
Brookside,
What is it?
Brookside Farm Lane? 48 Long Pond Drive.
148?
148.
48.
48.
48.
What's
Should say
48?
Should say 148.
Can I'm gonna just have to see that. I don't know what that is. Hang on.
Just sign.
Somebody got a
Here's
freebie.
here's the real third one. I'm like,
What is
why am I
this?
counting 4?
This is Catherine
That's
Green.
Kathy Green. Let's see
We
what
signing this one?
Yes, please. Yeah, this is 148 Long Pond Drive. 148 Long Pond. Dark Hollow.
What was the first one?
Oh, those were extensions and stuff, probably. What's, on the front cover, it should say, of the folder.
Oh, okay.
Pull that down and
Oh.
have some writing.
This 142 and 148 Long Pond Drive.
Oh, there was 2, because there were 2 separate parcels to be, that's why.
Okay.
There were 2 separate parcels when we started, so they had to have 2 orders of conditions, and then they combined the lot after. We're good. There's 4 of them. There's just 2 for that property.
Is that the one we saw today?
We didn't go.
We
No,
didn't-
sorry. I don't know who was in the middle of this one. But I send that around. You already signed that.
I did.
If you didn't sign, this is the half-signed one. That makes more sense. Okay.
Am I signing this?
Yes, you are, please. We do not have any minutes. You will have 2 sets next time.
got
That's all
one,
I got for you.
Stan
Thanks,
started signing
Yeah, I
it.
signed it.
I got one thing to talk
You
about
already
under
signed that.
any business that may
You
come
probably
before the
signed-
commission.
You already
Okay.
You already signed it. That was the one
Yeah.
that,
Sorry for the confusion.
No, it's me, I'm half asleep right now. But, any response from the police department on the concept of closing the gate at Bell's Neck Conservation Area at
I will
night?
check it, not that I've seen, but
Yeah.
I will recheck. And I know there was like a changing of the garden there in the past couple weeks, so if I
Yep.
didn't get anything, I will reach out to them. I'll make myself a note.
Well, here's something I want to suggest, is that I think, the season will be over before you know it. And
Yeah.
my primary concern was, legal activity during the herring run.
Yeah.
So, we have a lot of work to do, I feel, on determining what we're gonna do to manage that area.
Yes.
So I'm wondering, do we either set a working group among us, or if we all want to be involved, do we set a meeting that has a chunk of time specifically for that?
I don't know when we're gonna have time.
I know. I just
I'm
think,
okay. A work group's fine, I think.
okay, how do people feel about that? Because I want to enter next season knowing what we can do with the gate ahead of time and having that resolved. And I think we also have an obligation to talk about, how we're going to manage the site. We've never really fully got beyond the last step, which was the lease, for
Yeah.
farming. We really need to talk about that, I think.
So maybe it could be a couple people from this group, but also the working group would be Heinz,
Heinz?
somebody from the police department.
Sure.
There's a couple of volunteers who, like Ron, who lives right there, Wayne, who lives nearby, who's always
Yep.
there, who are obviously very active in
Yeah.
the Bell's Neck, who would be good members to talk about management.
Sure. Do you think it should be a independent, it needs to be a posted meeting, obviously?
If it's more than two members, if it's two or more members of the commission, then
Yeah.
it has to be a posted meeting.
Right?
If not, it can be kind of this ad hoc type committee, like a friends of almost, not a friends of, but you know what I mean, like a stewardship type group.
Let's
We already
get,
have a trails stewards, we don't have trails committee anymore, but we have a trails stewards group,
right.
and we meet on occasion.
You want to give this 10 minutes? Just have people chime in on how they feel?
Sure.
Paul, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. I was gonna ask Amy about today, whether you had gotten in touch with the police department, but I think a group.
I'll
put
recheck,
together-
I don't think I have, but I will
Right.
It's
recheck
okay.
my emails.
But I
What-
think a group, a working group would be, to have things in place for next season, I think is a good idea.
Okay.
Well, maybe that group then, and that group would come up with ideas and bring it back to the commission as a whole, who has to
Well-
make the decision.
Right. Yeah, I think we somewhat had the morning openings resolved, but the evenings are problematic. You can't expect the department staff to grab the evening closures 7 days a week. So, okay.
I think it's a great step in the right direction, because there's a lot of issues in that whole area to address.
Right.
And
Okay.
you gotta start somewhere.
Right.
Bringing in people from outside, I think is a good alternative. It should
Right.
lead to good input.
Right. Okay.
Seems like a good idea to me. I guess I have a question. Are trail cameras or something a sort of possibility over there? I mean, specifically if you're concerned about poaching and, you can lock the gates, but people can walk in still, and it's not that long a walk, really. Park over by off Depot there and just walk down the bike trail a little way and in there. I'm just wondering whether, and what you said last night about the value of eels in particular, I was dumbfounded. I mean, there's huge incentive for some of this poaching, right? So
Oh, yeah.
my question is whether just having trail cameras out there with some kind of infrared, so they operate at night, would be worth the investment or something to consider.
Maybe. We've used them, I think, once before, when we had a lot of dumping of trash.
We have used cameras in Bell's
quite
Neck,
quite a ways back. Some people might feel they're intrusive otherwise, but I think it's an option.
More that
But at a
one
time-
got stolen and one got taken by the environmental police, never to be seen again.
Oh, really?
Really?
Yep.
How expensive are they? I mean, you should,
It's actually, the camera itself is only it depends on what type you get. If you get the Wi-Fi capable ones, which you have to have a subscription to have a hotspot essentially, so that'll download directly on somebody's phone, the pictures. That's more expensive. If you get like the regular trail cameras, like game cameras, they're like $100 to $200, even cheaper, but you want a good night vision one. So I think we paid a little $100, but then the gear to the straps and the batteries and all the SD card, because it's basically like a camera, that's added up. I think it ended up each being $250 with all the bells and whistles. So we have the money. It's just, especially in a high traffic area, like by the flume, you're gonna get that camera going off constantly.
Oh, yeah.
So the camera card's gonna fill up quick. So if there's a way,
Right.
we would need people to help kind of check it, if you were gonna do that.
Right. My first step would be to really reduce the night access with the gate closure. And, you know, you're not gonna keep everyone out,
Yeah.
but you're gonna keep that truck that has a tank, you know, aerated system.
It's gonna minimize, cut that.
Yeah, so you know, that's something we'd talk
It's
about.
not gonna it'll make it less easy for
Right.
people.
It won't eliminate it.
Or to position the camera at the gate so that you could, I don't know if it's illegal to see license plates, because that's the only way
We
you're gonna
actually have
identify
signs
them.
in the Bell's Neck that say this area is under video surveillance.
Well, and that's the
So
only way
we
you're gonna
announce it to
identify.
people. It's
Right.
on Bell's Neck Road anyway, I saw it today.
Right. Okay.
You know your license plate gets recorded every time you go over one of the bridges.
I know that. I know that.
But yeah, I do think, I
I
mean,
just
in
read
general,
that.
Boy,
dumping,
Well, now,
poaching, we got a lot of
well, now
problems with
with,
Bell's Neck.
Yeah.
tolls and everything, you get
Yeah.
recorded all over the place.
But I just read that about
any other
the-
thoughts, Stan, on this concept?
I think it's a good
No,
idea.
not our bridges?
Jim?
Oh, no, I didn't.
Well, yeah, I think we gotta move forward, and it's hard to find the time at these meetings.
Okay.
so-
It is really
So
hard.
maybe a separate meeting?
Yep.
Who wants to participate on the working group?
I'm in.
Mark, I figured you'd be there.
Yeah.
I think I'd like to help out.
All right.
I would like to.
Anyone else, or?
How big of a
Mark.
group do you want?
Well,
Yeah.
it's up to you guys, and all members are gonna vote on the results, and there'll be discussion on the results, so, you know, it's, I picture us, you know, maybe having a working group or two on other topics as this year goes on. There's things I'd love to make progress on. You know,
I like the initiative. Love
yeah,
it.
well, you know, we work so hard to be part of this, and then we move the permits, and it's essential, but it's nice to do the side projects. And we don't do a lot of the side
I
projects, but,
appreciate it.
yeah, we
had
all,
talked originally, quite a while ago, before I was out, about doing something with oysters.
The reef.
oh, the reef.
Did you do anything
The
with
reef is up
that?
to me to get the proposal back. We had a meeting specifically
did.
on this.
And I gotta help you
And
with the permits.
I got some good advice from everybody. It's up to me to deliver a narrative that then Amy and Nick, I guess, would take towards,
We would just do the permit for you.
Right.
We would write up the application.
right? I agreed to work with Heinz to file the permit for the Division of Marine Fisheries.
Yeah.
And that's pending, and then we'd get the narrative. But it's up to me, I think, to do it. I'm so close. I need like an hour and a half.
So hard
And I
sometimes.
just, it's, you know, it's spring, and my head's spinning, but it's really close to going
Good.
forward, and it would be a notice of intent that we'd review. I think we agreed, I talked about having a subcommittee for that, but whoever was on the subcommittee probably couldn't vote on the notice of intent.
Correct.
So we pulled back, and so I would excuse myself when the time comes. So, but that's a side project that I think is really fun, and it's something I think we'd all like to be involved with.
Mhm.
You know, so maybe the Bell's Neck can become that type of thing.
I think it's a good start. I mean, going
Okay.
forward, I think we need to pay specific attention to a number of pieces of property in town.
I agree.
And this is the beginning.
Do we need a vote to form a working group, or just we'll pledge to?
I'll put it on the next meeting anyway, in case it's like one of those things, if anybody questions it.
Okay.
But we can start the ball rolling, but I'll put it on the next
But we
meeting,
could-
just
so
to
we're-
formalize it.
Have a separate meeting somewhere else, I mean, it's.
I think we'd post and have a separate meeting.
It would be. If there's
So
3 of you, I have to post it.
We could throw 2 hours at it, you know, and,
Oh,
Maybe
again,
once
like
a
how many
month on a
people you
Friday
wanna-
or
yeah, I mean,
something.
you could end up, everybody saying, yeah, we wanna be on it, and then have a sub.
I think that's okay. I
Oh,
wouldn't
okay.
want to
I mean,
exclude anybody,
You can include me on that, I mean.
right?
As long as if we ever make, decisions have to be made, we wanna make sure we have enough people to vote who are not gonna have a conflict of interest.
So the subcommittee members could,
Can I ask the town clerk tomorrow?
yeah,
I'll put it on the next agenda, but to say if we can have this committee, but
yeah,
now that I wanna make sure there's not gonna be a conflict of interest if we're on the committee and then voting on
Yep.
things as a commission,
good point.
okay?
We would probably be allowed to have a special meeting at any time. I believe that is
Correct.
allowed, and then anybody who's willing or wants to can come, and that would essentially
Mhm.
serve the same purpose.
Right,
Without creating any issues with voting or anything.
right. You couldn't really, yeah, make a decision at those. You'd have to, okay. All right, let me just check, but yes.
And semi-related, I just want to say that the herring count over at the reservoir is well over 700,000. It's outpacing all runs that are counted in the state by far. So a lot of fish are going through.
Yeah.
It'll probably be the top run in the state.
Well, that was last year too. What was the number last year?
Last year was like 850,
Yeah.
and it's the first year that that run became the top run in the state. It's always
So
been,
you're seeing that at the reservoir, or are you seeing what's going into Hinckley?
that's the reservoir count, which is an electronic count.
Yeah.
But what I'm hearing from others, the counters, Heinz, the Seymour run
Yeah.
and the Hinckley run is elevated from last year.
Good.
So last year was a big number, but they're seeing better numbers going these other places,
I
so,
did the Hinckley last year.
yeah,
The counting?
Yeah.
Nice.
yeah, so that's encouraging.
Good.
Yeah, you can almost visually just see that's the most fish I've seen there in years at low tide
Yeah.
by the herring ladder.
Mhm.
You know, one day they were just, covered the whole floor, just, flopping all around the sand, and
Right.
there's a lot of
Two
fish
weekends
there.
ago on a Sunday, I went and checked the counter, and there was 88,000 fish in the previous 24 hours.
Yeah.
There are many runs that don't have that for a whole season.
No, that's
It's good, yeah.
Two of you, I will get you the address of they're going to
Oh,
they're
yeah.
taking advantage of the MACC workshops this weekend that are here on Cape. So I'll get you that address tomorrow.
Okay. And the time?
I think it's 9 to 4, but yeah.
All right, any other business that comes before the commission?
We had a very good tour to trash. We had over 150 volunteers,
Wow,
who came and picked up trash around town on Saturday.
that's nice.
Gave over 400 seedlings and pounds of wildflowers at the Arbor Day seedling giveaway last week.
Very successful, 150 people, that's a nice turnout.
Yeah, it really was, because the morning started out kind of crappy, so.
Yeah,
Yeah, we had over 100 people pre-registered. We had about 50 walk-ins.
wow.
So it was really good. I think we got about, cumulatively, between trash and recycling, over 1,000 pounds of trash
Wow.
in 2 hours.
How many nips?
Oh, jeez.
1,300
Oh, my
in
God.
2 hours from 150 people.
That was what was picked up that day?
That was picked up that day. We counted them.
10 each.
Wow. Too bad they weren't worth a nickel.
Well, there's a renewed effort behind that. I believe one of our selectmen is touting that up the chain of government,
Mhm.
is to do some sort of a deposit on that, I believe.
Nice.
Well, I wonder if that could do, because remember 2 years ago, I think it was like 2 years ago at the state ballot, there was a proposal to, not just nips, but water bottles and everything.
Plastics, pretty much.
Plastics.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like,
The
when
warrant,
spraying water bottles, they don't have really a deposit around
see,
there.
Connecticut does.
Connecticut and Maine, right?
Yeah, well, I don't know Maine, but definitely Connecticut, because I know at one of the selectmen's meetings, there's a warrant regarding the whole,
Well, there's-
use of plastic bottles and everything. And-
Well, there's also, so next week is town meeting,
Right,
um,
May 6th, Monday.
Monday.
Oh, boy.
Be a good time. I'll be there.
Yay.
But there's also the citizen petition for banning plastic,
Right.
single-use, basically plastic bottles,
Yeah.
for towns, for the town.
Which I have, personally, I have a problem with that. I mean, I don't mind I'm not against it, but I think they make sure they have a plan to implement it.
Well, that's the whole thing, yes. So
Yeah.
without getting into it, because
I'm-
it's
I'm
not
gonna
a
make
really
a-
topic of
I'm gonna make a
discussion.
motion that we adjourn, because I think we're near the end, so.
Yeah, I'll second.
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay.